Mrs. Banks.
So, Ms. Banks, I'm sorry to interrupt again. Can we confirm that we're live?
And now we're back in a second.
It should be back live on YouTube. I'm receiving texts that people say it's back.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. I apologize again. For
Thank you.
interrupting.
Well, good evening and Happy New Year. This is the December year-to-date financials. Here are our financial objectives, which have not changed. Our agenda, of course, this is December year-to-date. And we do have an update for COVID-19. There was a new stimulus bill that was passed on December 27th, and we anticipate $54 billion coming to the K-12 education, which will be available actually through September 2023, we think. It's very similar language to the first set of ESSER funds, the $10.7 million that we received. Actually, it was, I believe, the fiscal year 2021, the current year title allocation, how those funds will be distributed, very similar to the last set of funds. Again, very similar in what we can use them for, although there was an addition of school repairs related to air quality. There were no E-rate funds included in this bill. I know there were some questions about that before. And this bill is approximately 4 times the amount of the original allocation. So we're anticipating about $45 million, which we should receive access to within 30 to 60 days. The non-public allocation is $2.75 billion. Last year, those funds were administered by the districts. We're not sure that that's going to be the same this year, but more to come on that. The transportation supplement grant, we're happy to report that we have identified about $415,000 that we can apply towards that grant. So we do anticipate that we will effectively use that grant. And much of that was used for on-bus monitors for special education, along with several other expenditures. As far as the update for the $10.7 million, a slight increase. Again, as I mentioned last month, we have made additional orders now that the students will be coming back in person. So we have spent about $3.78 million, or 35% of the original amount on PPE, sanitation, primarily. For December, it was another short holiday month, including a lot of calendar year-end processing activities, including the audit and preparing for 1099s and W-2s, purchase order closeouts, and some of the major expenditures you can see listed here. These are non-payroll expenditures over $100,000. However, there are lots of other expenditures that are less than $100,000, obviously, and excluded from this list are utilities, legal services, and as I mentioned, payroll expenditures. We do include check registers on our website if you'd like more information on specific expenditures by any vendors. Also, I guess not included on that last slide was the large tax payments that we received in December that we've talked about several times, which leads to this slide. The December results for all funds. We have received approximately $86.5 million in revenues, as you see in red for the month of December. or $116 million year to date, representing about 29.2% of the revenue budget. The largest increase in December was the new tax revenue from the tax levy that was passed in September, which represented about $76 million of the total of the local revenues. State revenue is mostly transportation and state aid, while federal includes special education, 21st century after-school programs, and food service. The December expenditures for all funds, as you can see, we spent approximately $28.3 million in December, almost $140 million year to date, or 34.7% of the expenditure budget. And we highlighted some of those major expenditures just a slide or two ago. As we look at our financial outlook, it's still a little bit unclear, but DESE has contacted us and about a further reduction in our state aid. We think it's related to charter enrollment. So that does fluctuate based on the charter's enrollment, but more information should be forthcoming, but we could be reducing our revenue in state aid up to an additional $6 million. Of course, our December revenues that we were happy to receive came in pretty much as expected. We hope that the January revenue will do the same. And of course, we'll now start planning for the additional stimulus funds that was discussed. That really concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I have a question, and this kind of goes back to the question I had a few meetings ago. Now that we're getting this new stimulus money, will there be more money available to do the upgrades to the Wi-Fi in our buildings? And it concerns me now, especially since we have this new string of COVID, and I wanted to make sure we're prepared. Can we use the previous funds to work on that upgrade?
Well, absolutely. That will be something that will be discussed in the leadership team. Dr. Adams, if you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I know Mrs. Vanoy will be covering some of that in her technology update. She has the E-rate plan that she can discuss a little bit in her technology presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Banks.
Thank you.
Ms. Vanoy?
I want to personally apologize for the technical difficulties we had earlier. Let me check on that microphone. Hold on just a minute. As I said, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you for being patient. So this evening, I'm going to talk about the technology in the district and what we've done since COVID-19 hit us back in the early spring. The surprising thing is, prior to all of that occurring, we had already decided to order 8,000 iPads for our students in K-1-2 and then 6-7-8. We already had 13,000 for grades 3, 4, and 5 and our pre-K students. So we had already ordered the 8,000 iPads in March. But after we discussed opportunities with our Restart Committee that attended over the summer, the determination was made to buy laptops for 9 through 12 students. So we did order 6,000 laptops for students in those grade levels. We also knew that we needed some hotspots for our students to use because our surveys indicated that a lot of the students did not have internet at home. So we ordered 6,000 hotspots, and we also are paying for the unlimited data on that on a monthly basis. And then something else that we'd already decided prior to COVID hitting was to refresh the 4-year-old laptops that the teachers had. So we did a Dell 2-in-1 laptop that's a laptop and a tablet. So with all the things on the screen right now, that totals a little bit over $9.1 million that we have put into technology since March. And that number does include that monthly cost for the 6,000 unlimited data plan. When we step back and think about distributing almost 8,000 pieces of devices in the spring, over the summer, and then distributing in the fall, we touched over 32,000 pieces of equipment. When we did this in the spring, it was a 2-to-1 iPad, but when we did this in the fall, it was 1-to-1 for every student. And I do want to make a note on the previous slide, inventory at this point with technology is not a concern. We have enough inventory. So currently with the students we have enrolled right now, 92% of those do have a device, whether it's an iPad or a laptop. 5% of those families have opted out of having district equipment. That's an option that they can choose, and 5% of those did choose the opt-out. We have 3% of our current students who are enrolled have not returned their devices from last spring. So many of those students are using packets, and those students who are in person, who chose to come in person second and third quarter, they have a loaner device in the school for them. We are working with safety and security to retrieve those devices, but right now it's about 3%. And 2% of our students currently have some broken equipment. It could be a broken iPad, it could be a broken hotspot, or it could be a screen broken on the laptop. In almost every case, parents have decided to do a payment plan. And so all we ask is that they pay $10 every week or $20 every other week, and then they're given a different device. And when I talked about the 6,000 hotspots that we have, 36% of our current enrolled students have indicated that they do need a hotspot, and they do have them. So because of the streaming that we've been doing since last spring, we did see some concerns with our network. And so we replaced our firewall to the latest and greatest model. The one that we had before was about 8 years old. And the firewall is what allows specific websites to be accessed when you're on site. And with the traffic that we were having, we saw latency in the network. And so we did upgrade the firewall. The firewall is a requirement of E-rate, which I'll touch on the next slide, but it's a requirement of the Child Internet Protection Act, or you might hear it called CIPA. You have to have a firewall, a protection of inappropriate sites that students cannot access if you agree to take E-rate funds. We also doubled our internet speed from the district to the World Wide Web. And along those same lines, we increased the licenses on our Edge router, which is what connects all of our devices to the internet, because again, we were having some latency issues. We did that over the Thanksgiving holiday. And as of the last week of December, once we tweaked a lot of settings, we don't seem to be having latency issues since we returned on January 4th. So I mentioned E-rate a couple times. E-rate is a federal law that the FCC manages, and it provides two different categories of funding. Category 1 involves your internet service provider or your ISP. So probably at home you have Charter or you have AT&T as your internet service provider. So it pays for that connection. It also pays for the peer LAN WAN that's in our district. So every school is connected from their school back to central office, and that's called the local area network. It also pays for the cost for that connection. Category 2 involves maintenance on our network, which is what we talked about on the previous screen. It also involves cabling, whether it's repair or whether it's new projects. So when we did the PropS labs about 8 years ago, we had significant number of wiring that we had to put in, and E-rate was able to pay for that wiring. It can be cable for telephones or it can be cable for data. As of 5 years ago, E-rate no longer pays for phone service. We used to only pay a limited amount of our cell phones, and we also used to only pay a limited amount of the maintenance on our telephone system. They no longer fund that as of 5 years ago. So how does E-rate help us? It helps us in category 1 and 2. In category 1, that we only pay 10% of the cost. That's a significant decrease over paying 100%. If category 2 is approved, so they approve category 1 first, and then if there's enough funding for everyone who submitted, then they look at category 2. If category 2 is approved, then there is a cap of $50 per student for 5 years. It used to be unlimited, but in their last decision 6 years ago, they actually had $30 per student, and we're under the new rules now, so they have increased that to $50 per student. We did hear some rumblings back in the spring that E-rate might pay for the hotspots. Right now, they don't pay for anything unless it's in a district school building, and they were contemplating paying for hotspots that students take home, and they decided not to do that. So historically, I'd like to show you the funds that we have received back to 2013. Now, we have been involved as a district in E-rate since 1998, which was the very first year that E-rate was funded. And in 2000, the district received $56 million in E-rate funds in order to put the original network in. So it has certainly helped the district in all of those years on our 10% cost. The lighter blue is the category 1, which is the internet service provider and the local area network. The darker blue is the category 2, which is the cabling and network maintenance. So you'll see in 2013 and 14, there isn't a dark blue. That's because of all of the requests that went in those 2 years. The FCC ran out of money, so they did not fund category 2 for anyone in those 2 years. So this is just a snapshot of what we have received, which is a little over $10 million since 2014-15. So we currently have some RFPs out in our purchasing department. They actually went out today. One of them is to maintain the maintenance, which is category 2 that we've discussed. Another one is to provide the cabling, whether it's break fix or new projects. And then the third one is to upgrade our current Wi-Fi. The original Wi-Fi that we have in the district right now, we put it in 2012 and 2013. And as many of you know, technology's changed over those years. So the decision was made to upgrade our Wi-Fi, put an RFP out there, and possibly have E-rate pay for that. If we would have done it 2 or 3 years ago, they wouldn't have funded it because we would have been out of the budget with the $30 per kid. So now's a good time to do that. So all of these RFPs are E-rateable, and we'll submit to the Board of Education in time for the E-rate deadline of March 25th. E-rate's all about compliance, it's all about documentation, it's all about timelines. So we have to make sure that we get everything posted, returned, decided, submitted to you, and then submitted to E-rate so that we can get funding effective July 1. So all of these projects cannot start unless you have approval and cannot start prior to April 1. They do give that last quarter leniency in case you have a big project to do that you can start April 1st. But I don't imagine if the end date is March 25th that we'll have a decision by April 1st. And then we patiently wait for approval from the federal government. So I've opened any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Ms. Benoit.
Thank you.
Good evening. The winter season is finally upon us, and it comes the possibility of early school closures as well as early dismissals. However, this school year has given us the opportunity to modify the traditional inclement weather plan as we know it and pivot to virtual instruction on these particular days, which allows for continuous teaching and learning. So on inclement weather virtual days, so keeping that term in mind, there's key points on this slide that I really want to make sure that I highlight. Although there are 3 points here, I really want to highlight 2. What we will continue to do on inclement weather virtual days is that we will have instruction virtually, as we all know, and we will adhere to attendance as well as participation as it relates to synchronous as well as asynchronous instruction on inclement weather virtual days. So teaching and learning expectations, as with the key points that I just highlighted, there's specific areas that I just want to remind us of. So let's just say, for instance, that there is a pending inclement weather day the day before. We always want to encourage our teaching staff to take their devices home, as well as kids who may have a device at school. Also, there's a question around what do we expect of staff as it relates to accountability? The accountability is simple. If a teacher, a staff person is unavailable to provide instructional support on inclement weather virtual days, they will be expected to utilize PTO and/or a sick day. So what can families expect? So we will continue to move forward with the use of media outlets, the district website, local media, just to make certain that the message is clear that we are having an inclement weather day. I just want to continue to stress, this is no longer what we consider our inclement weather day to be in the traditional sense. As I've shared with the leadership team as well, no, it will not be this notion of going to Art Hill, if you will. So we will continue with our instructional day, and this will also address the instructional gaps that we've had as it relates to unfinished learning. This is just a sample schedule, how the day will unfold, but we will start our day. Teachers will have their notes on their class pages. Any updates to the school websites will be found on the website. But the expectation is that all teaching notes, expectation of the day will be uploaded to teacher web pages. And this here again is just a sample schedule. So I just wanted to just share with you what the intent is, because now we are in the winter season, and just to remind everyone what our plans are as it relates to inclement weather day. Virtual instruction will continue.
As the board knows, we have been in virtual instruction for middle and high school students since the beginning of the year. That shifted on yesterday, and I'll kind of give an update in my restart. But this intent tonight is to make the board aware that we're looking to do 100% virtual for those days that would normally be inclement weather days. That has not occurred at this point in time this year. There is an expectation over the next 2 or 3 weeks that there will likely be snow, and we wanted to get this before the board so you are aware that we are providing this as an opportunity for this school year. Obviously, we'll assess how this goes this year and come back to the board sometimes in the summer, after summer, when we present the calendar to the board. We are working with the union right now because part of our responsibility is to work with them around the calendar for next year. Differently, since 90% of our kids have already been doing this anyway for the school year. Well, 75%, 90 is high, about 75% are already in this modality already, and teachers are familiar with it and students as well. So obviously, thanks to myself, Mrs. Dr. Knight and myself will take any kind of questions that the board might have.
So Dr. Knight, you did, it makes sense for inclement weather days, especially at events. You did hint at early dismissal. How would that work? So for early dismissal days, would students then be expected to take classes, or early dismissal is just dismissed early and we'll try them all?
Yeah, I talked about early dismissal, but we typically don't engage in early dismissal. So that was just something that I did put in just as another disclaimer. It's not typically something that we do engage in. We really try to get in front of inclement weather days before kids come to school. Now, there has been, I want to say, a time or two where we've had early dismissal, but it's very few times.
But in the plan that does come later, that will be accounted for?
Yes, sir.
This may be more for Dr. Adams, but for either of you, how does this fall in comparison with what other districts are doing in our area?
It varies. Some districts are allowing elementary kids to come, high school and middle school kids to come and elementary to stay, but it varies from district to district. I think Dr. Knight and our team has done some research on that. You want to?
Yeah, so we looked, yes, sir. So we looked at a couple of districts, Ms. Brody Collins, and for the most part, everyone is following an inclement weather virtual day. But yeah, we looked at several districts, neighboring districts, and many of them are adhering to this. There may be one or two districts who are saying inclement weather day is just that. So there is no instruction taking place. But because of the unfinished learning, districts are continuing with virtual learning.
That makes sense to me. Thank you.
This is Natalie. Can you hear me? I had a question.
Yes.
So I guess I'm wondering the inclement weather about staff not being able to be present. Do we have any fail safes to account for like area-wide network outages for staff or students in an area that maybe, you know, an ice storm has knocked over the cable internet or something like that? Is there anything to make sure that we are being equitable about that and fair?
I would think, Ms. Fowler, first of all, that's an excellent question. Then it would truly be an inclement weather day. We would have to count it as an absent day and then have that day made up if we get noticed that obviously if lines are frozen and those kinds of things. So we will have to adjust. This is the plan right now if we're able to have the internet access available for students. But obviously, if something occurs that can occur, then obviously it will be a makeup day, just like it would be normally.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. I'd like to provide the board with a quick update on the St. Louis Public Schools second semester restart. That restart started on January the 4th through the March 12th date. Want to talk a little bit about enrollment, the school day, and the staff update. I think staff update I eliminated, but the January 4th through 21st in enrollment school day. January 4th, we were 100% virtual for everyone in the entire district. Obviously, a lot of conversation around families gathering for the winter break, Christmas, New Year's time. So we want to give some distance from the time that students are out. And so as a result of that, 100% of our student population was virtual. That took place from January 11th to January 15th, which is this week, 2 days in person and 2 days virtual. One group attends Monday and Tuesday, 11 and 12, which was yesterday and today. And another group attends Wednesday and Thursday, which is the 13 and 14. Why is that? When we initially put the plan in place, we thought we were going to have a much larger number of students coming back. That number looks like right now about 26% of the student population coming back, at least based upon the survey data that we have. Starting on the 19th, because obviously Martin Luther King Day is a holiday, and the 15th is our professional development day, as I indicated earlier. All in-person students attend school every day, 5 days a week. We have no school on the dates that I just indicated, January the 15th and Monday, January the 18th for the 2 dates that I already covered. And so fully all students coming next week, but we wanted to give an opportunity for those middle and high schools that have never really had students in place all year, to give them opportunity to set up systems, procedures, and all of those kinds of things. As it relates to the restart update, again, returning on January the 11th, 2021, roster of active students was supplied to each building. Phone calls were made to each family to indicate preference to remain virtual or to return to in-person instruction. About 13,422 at the time of this presentation, a collection of data, responded to the survey. About 7,841 said that they want to come back to in-person or brick and mortar. That represented at that time about 39.6%. Since this time, additional students have indicated they want to come, and additional surveys will return. If you did not respond to the survey, it automatically put you in a position of staying virtual. So it was a default to remain virtual if you did not indicate you wanted to come back in person. The grade level numbers, as you can see, elementary was about 49% at the time of this. The middle school numbers were about 28%, senior high were about 26%, alternative about 17.6%, which represents about 39.6% total. That's not an average of the percentage. That is because we have more students at the elementary level than we have at the middle and high school level. So that's why you see the 39.6, not an average of those numbers. At this point in time, based upon the data on yesterday, about 5,539 students returned. As of today, the numbers were about 5,900 students for the first 2 days. Again, we're talking AB, so that number is going to likely be higher next week when we have fully everybody coming back. You have this data, and I don't want to bore you with this, but this gives you a percentage of every single school at the elementary level, every single school at the middle school level. Again, this has been adjusted based on new information coming in. At the high school level, return in person to in person as well at the high school level. One of the things that I wanted to also make the board aware of is that the extracurricular started again for the winter schedule, and you can see the schools and the sports that are covered. Some schools decided not to participate because of the numbers. A school like Cleveland decided not to, Collegiate decided not to, Gateway decided at the boys basketball level, but all other sports they decided not to. And you can see what the chart looks like. They were given an opportunity to do so, but like some schools didn't have enough kids, some kids did not want to participate. It was by choice, and some schools obviously are participating fully in some sports, but all schools gave up some sports as a result of the desire to, number one, not engage as a result of the pandemic. Just so you know, all students have to do a test every other week if they're participating in sports, and that's the nasal test that they have to do every week. So some students did not want to participate because they didn't want to go through that on a regular basis, similar to what the pros are doing in all sports as well. Questions that the board might have at this point in time relative to the restart?
My question is about the class size on the in-person. I'm wondering how many children are we allowing in each classroom, in the high school, in the middle, and the elementary? And I also would like to know in regards to the vaccination, a lot of people have not been able to get vaccinated, and we are going back with full class sizes. So, or are we going back to full class sizes without having our staff vaccinated? And if they are, then are you aware of any kind of schedule with the health department where they will be helping our staff get that protection?
Excellent questions. First and foremost, the class sizes are relatively small. In some cases, Mrs. Jones, we've had 26 students in the whole building at the middle and high school level because families have chosen to stay virtual. And so the staff is required to be there every day, all week this week, such that we could support whatever kids come. But we don't have, as I indicated before, 26% of our high school and middle school population is coming back, are looking to come back, and that number is lower than the numbers I just indicated to you. The numbers I just indicated are lower than the numbers that said they're coming back. So we do not have any large class sizes. I want to say at this point in time, the largest numbers I think I've seen over the last 2 days is about 150 kids at the middle and high school level in any particular building. So the numbers are incredibly small. So we don't have any issues right now around class size. Any elementary school that we anticipated having issues with class size, we're giving them ability to do an A-B schedule, which means some kids come on Monday, some kids come on Tuesday, and vice versa on Wednesday and Thursday. So at this point in time, no outstanding issues with class sizes. As it relates to the vaccine, our preliminary information, thank you. Our preliminary information indicates that about 85% of our staff that we surveyed are indicating that they are interested in taking the vaccine. The health professionals, our partners indicated they need to have some idea what the numbers look like, such that when the vaccine becomes available, it is possible that our nurses or the vaccine can be provided to our staff. I don't know where we are on the list right now, but the preliminary information from the health department looks like around February or March is when the vaccine might be available to teachers who are considered essential employees. Nurses right now are being surveyed, and they are likely to receive the vaccine across the region in the next 10 days, at least the first vaccination shot. But for all employees, we don't have a firm date when the vaccine will be coming. What we've heard is sometime in February or sometimes in March at this point in time. So we are not allowed all students to come back. Students can come back by choice. If a student wants to remain virtual, they can do so. But I want to indicate that 5,900 students is only about 25% of our total population for 68 buildings. So we don't have a lot of students coming back at all right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Natalie. I have a question if you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Have we, at this point, since we had a bit of a break, have we aligned our teacher preferences to student demand with respect to who wishes to remain virtual and who wishes to come back? I know that there are a lot of teachers who are adamant about being in the classroom with their students, and then there are some teachers who are still a little bit anxious or uncomfortable or have other circumstances that they would prefer to remain virtual. So are we trying to do a better job this time of matching up who wants to be where?
The decisions regarding, an example would be for this week, regardless of what desire a teacher has, all students are coming back because we're coming back after a break, and we want to make sure that we have full support to support whatever population comes back. Our principals are working with their staff and with the Human Resources Department as it relates to that. But at the end of the day, Ms. Viles, we are trying to make sure that we accommodate the needs of our student population, and to your point, aligning where possible with the staff's needs, desires, or issues might be. Mrs. Majors and the HR department do an excellent job in that space, and they're working closely with principals and with staff to try to do their best to accommodate. But at the end of the day, it's really about making sure that our employees are providing services to our students in a way that will maximize their opportunities. And so we are looking at it. We having HR, as I said before, working with school personnel, principals and administrators to do that, to do a better job of aligning. Again, when we started this in October, we were working through the process. We've been able to finesse it and work through it well at the elementary level, work out some of the kinks, and we're better prepared at the middle and high school level, I believe. In addition to that, I do want to frame this because I may not have an opportunity. The health department sent us a letter that indicated that they are pleased with how we're doing contact tracing and all of those kind of details, Mrs. Viles and board, such that we are example for the city of St. Louis in terms of how that's working. We put that in the bulletin to staff as well. And while they had some concerns about middle and high school students coming back, they had no concerns about our middle and high school kids coming back because of how we were working through the quarantining, the contact tracing, and to your question, the alignment of what staff needed, what students needed. And so they felt comfortable, as a matter of fact, exemplary in terms of what was happening in that space. So yes, long story short, yes, we're working to do a better job at the middle and high school level. We worked out some kinks with the elementaries and feel a lot better about how that's happening.
Thank you. I appreciate the attention to that effort. I know that that's been a great concern. So hopefully we'll get pretty much on track as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Adams, I have two questions. The first one is the process of choosing. So I know that in Q1, we gave families the choice to choose, but they were locked into that choice for the quarter. Is that similar right now? So students who have indicated, or families that have indicated that they want their high school student to go back, if they've already made that decision, are we locked into that 26%, or can they tomorrow say, you know what, I've changed my mind, I want to go in? And similarly for the ones who have gone in, maybe I changed my mind, I don't want to go in.
Excellent question. Each quarter, as you may know, we've given families an opportunity to select. We did that this time as well. It is much easier to go to say, I want to come in, then go back and stay virtual than it is vice versa. To Mrs. Jones' point, we want to make sure that the numbers accommodate that. To Mrs. Vowell's point, we want to make sure that we have adequate staff in person to provide that instruction to students. So schools have been working with families around that. So we are flexible to a degree that we can be flexible based on the needs of the school environment, meaning that we can accommodate the kids coming in. But we ask them to make a decision early on, and principals are working to try to accommodate that. So moving from in-person to virtual, a lot easier. You just plug in, stay at home, and do that. Moving from virtual to in-person, much more aligned to what the school's numbers are. At this point in time, Mr. Lang, I think we could accommodate everybody at the middle and high school level, just to be honest with you. But again, families need to decide early on. The other issue for us is we need to know who's coming on a regular basis so we can do contact tracing. If a kid is there every single day, it's a lot easier to say, these were the 7 kids that the kid was sitting next to. We have specific charts that kids are seating charts for every single kid, so we know who's there. So we want to be accommodating as much as possible and also maintain the contact tracing and the quarantining that we have to do. So long and short answer is yes, we try to give some flexibility based on the numbers that are in that particular building.
And then my second question is around any new enrollment. So usually a new semester, a new day usually brings around enrollment changes. With this semester just starting, have we seen any students, or do we know what the enrollment numbers look like, or new enrollment looks like for our district?
I do not off the top of my head. I can get that number for you, but I don't have any real-time data relative to how many kids came back last Friday.
Right.
I'm sorry, last Monday, but I can get that for you.
Right, and that, I imagine that's in the next presentation anyway, because we usually get it. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure it's in the next one. I don't need it now, but for the next presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Evans, I do have one last question. It's in regards to emergency days. I know Dr. Knight talked about emergency snow days now becoming virtual days. And I had a concern about January the 20th, and the government is now asking people to be very cautious and to stay home as if they possibly can. And I don't know how the board would consider that or who would take that issue up, but a lot of, I know with the terrorist attack and at the Capitol, I'm just really concerned about the safety of our staff and our students. So I don't know if we could consider that at all on January the 20th. Thank you.
We will get some intel, Mrs. Jones and board, from our police department, and it is an excellent question in light of what we're hearing across the country. So I do think it makes sense to pause and get as much intel as possible regarding January 20th or January the 17th is what I heard as well. So I don't have any information right now. We have not had any detailed conversation with them, but we will reach out over the next day to talk to them to try to find out if we need to do anything as it relates to that. But it is an excellent question, one that I had not thought about. So thank you for providing it.
Just wanted to say thank you to the contact tracing team. I read that we all received as a board the email from the health department, and it was really encouraging and something that we should all be proud of, that we're kind of looked at as a model for how schools might be doing this. So thank you to everyone who's working on that team.
Thank you for them.
So we'll move into our consent agenda. As always, we will take all walk-on items separately. There are 3 of those, and then there is an item that is being reintroduced from the last time. We will take that one last. So just in the spirit of efficiency, I will make a motion that we approve the consent agenda items. I'm sorry, are there any of the standard items that you want to take separately? Okay, so I move that we approve consent agenda items 01, 12, 21, 01 through 01, 12, 21, 11. Is there a second? Are there questions or discussion on any of these items? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Is there a motion for the first walk-on item? So I will move to approve item 01122112, which is an MOU with the City of St. Louis Treasurer's Office. Is there a second? Second. Questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Abstain.
Dr. Roberts, Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes. Can you hear me?
motion still carries.
Yes.
Motion passed.
I move that we approve 01122113, which is the acceptance of funds from Parsons Blewett in the amount of $701,411. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
So we have one remaining walk-on item, which is a separate sheet of paper. I move that we approve item 01122114, which is to adopt the St. Louis Public Schools policy to replace COVID CARES Act and related legislation. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item?
Yeah, I just want to make a note that my email, there was confusion about my email, so I did not get that. So that will be reflected in my vote.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Abstain.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Dr. Adams, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
I want to thank the board first and foremost. Obviously, we started this conversation in October 2019. And after 15 months now, my hope is that this part concludes tonight with whatever decision the board makes. But I realize that it will continue because this is a matter, unless there's some systemic way that we address this, that it will continue. We engaged an outside partner, Emergent Wisdom, to engage the community. After they completed their work and provided a report in March of 2020, obviously a pandemic had occurred at that point in time in terms of schools being closed. That report was put on our website for all to see, but obviously I'm understanding now that it's not as many people saw it as we thought needed to. We paused the work until October 2020 because of the pandemic. After 2 months of discussion and feedback, we paused again at the 12/15 date. We requested that those with resources contact us to provide support, resources, ideas to obtain, or ideas to obtain other resources. We, myself personally, as well as members of the board, depending upon their schedule, participated in some 20 meetings with nonprofits, alumni organizations, other partner organizations, and elected officials. In most cases, there were ideas that would require a great deal of time and likely more resources that needed to be aligned to the ideas that were presented to us. There was a lot of belief that growth would take place because of what was occurring in an area, or a belief that the student population would increase. There's nothing that has been presented to me that would indicate that that would occur, likely with the exception of 2 schools, and I'll frame that was in a second. As I indicated, these meetings were really heavy around the notion of the passion around what needed to take place. The opportunity to pause was incredibly important, that it helped me rethink or think about this notion of school consolidation, especially as it relates to these 11 schools, but quite frankly, the overall concept of school consolidation, and the belief that we needed an overall plan that is much more global than just these schools. How do we really address this much more global concern? We must think about the issues of schooling in the entire city, which I know this board has talked to me about and talked to others about, that has risen itself over the last 60 days for me, but obviously longer, and something that I've thought about a great deal, but even much more intensely over the last 60 days. To do that, we need a wider conversation about schools, which requires the parties in the city that influence decisions about schools. For those who may have listened and those who did not, I spoke to this notion around school saturation at the DESI meeting today, and I said to them that a challenge for this district is this notion of school saturation, meaning too many schools for the population that we service. As you know, the population has declined, the number of schools has increased, the population of the city has also declined. And so we're sitting here with this dilemma of looking at 11 schools with the idea, whether I'm here as superintendent beyond my contract or not, members of this board will be and have to deal with this issue again unless something bigger takes place. Too many schools based on the declining city population and student population, and increasing in new schools being added, and duplication of services and resources just puts this entire community at risk unless there is some mechanism that allows us to get to the tables with the parties that are responsible, whether those are elected officials or other influential parties that make decisions around schools in this community, has to take place. The notion of this issue really requires an overall collaborative plan that really indicates what this community needs and deserves, quite frankly, for our marginal students. This may be board, public, community, an opportunity to use this interest at a high level in this community to support such a plan. I don't know. I'm hopeful that it does. No guarantees here, but I am really hopeful that it drives that conversation. After doing this for the last 12 years, I would like to leave nothing more in this community with some overall plan about what needs to happen for schools. For the some 38,000 students that receive public education, whether that's 11,000 in charters, 18,000 that we support, and about 3,800 kids that participate in the VIC program. So with this in mind, this is my adjusted recommendation. I provided each board member with 4 options. And the options are before you. I'm not going to necessarily go through the options because you have them in front of you, and I don't necessarily want to read all of them, quite frankly. And so it's really the board's time at this point in time to have a conversation. I put on the table 11 schools to close. The board can easily approve that recommendation. I think the feedback that we received from certain members of the community after talking to board members individually, some are at a pause regarding all 11 schools, and I get it, understand it, and quite frankly support it. But I do think there's some other opportunities here. I think there's an opportunity for a bigger conversation. There's an opportunity for a much smaller conversation around the 11th school, but there is also an opportunity to engage those parties like elected officials who come to the table with resolutions, those community groups that have come to the table with resolutions. The belief that we are about to start an election cycle that will engage parties who have not been part of this conversation in a real direct way. And so I am committed to, regardless of the option that the board selects, working with any party to do that. That is a critical piece for me. a critical piece, I think, for this community. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to come back to this community 2 years from now, 3 years from now, unless there is an overall plan. And I would be, as I said to the state board today, there needs to be some kind of moratorium on how many schools opening in the not too distant future, meaning ASAP, because I guarantee you we'll be back at this table. How do I know that? Since 2003, 47 St. Louis public schools have closed. Since 2003, quite frankly, 2005, because that's when charters were quasi-authorized, 15 charter schools have closed. So 62 schools have closed in this city since 2003. And we have 11 on the table today to raise that number to 70. That outdistances the number of schools that we presently support and the number of charter schools. I think there are 36 charter schools that are open as well. I think there's 16 to 19 authorizers, but 36 buildings. The words too many come to mind for this community, and the resources are being squandered in a way that I don't think they need to be squandered to support the students we have. So should more dollars come here? I don't know that dollars are needed. I think a plan is needed to support what needs to happen. So I'll shut up at this point in time. The board has my 4 options. Option 1 and 4, I do not support at all. At this point in time, obviously option 1 was on the table originally, but in light of the conversations we've had, in light of new data that I've looked at and gathered, I would like the board to look at option 2 and 3, and I'm willing to take any questions relative to those 2 options, and for the board to have some dialogue as well.
So I think if we could start with questions first. So if you have questions for Dr. Adams about any of the, about anything, let's start with that, and then we'll go kind of into discussion.
I'm sorry, Madam President.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I
don't.
forgot one piece that I want to say.
Of course.
In our conversations, it's clear to me that many people don't understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. At least the what I think they understand, but not the why. The what is that our population has shifted. We have older buildings and a number of issues that I just alluded to, the what and the why. But what we're also trying to accomplish that's not clear is that we're trying to free up additional dollars to do the following. Number one, if schools close, we will have recruiters that we call upgrade specialists, if you will. The word upgrade is not necessarily meaning anything more than somebody to work with kids, recruiters to help them get to a school, hopefully a school that has high academic results, but families have to make those decisions, and we will support them in that effort. So keeping our magnet schools open such that any kid can get in, number one. Number two, increasing our general operating budget so that schools can have more money per student to support the kinds of things that they want to have, increasing it by some 15 or 20%. 15% is what we said. Our title dollars will remain the same because we suspect that there will be less dollars. We just obviously got some information from Mrs. Banks that indicates some additional dollars might be coming that are focused around CARES. The notion of having a more advanced placement courses and more electives at our high school levels, because some of our high schools are so small that it minimizes the opportunity for students to get a full high school experience. And so we don't see any dollars needed for that because the closings of the high schools would allow that to occur naturally. We also see the opportunity to make sure that the nurses that we have can easily accommodate the buildings that remain open. Right now, we're splitting nurses, we're splitting counselors. There would not be a need to do that. And that we will still have an opportunity to split for social workers, but there will be more social workers available to support the kids that are already in those buildings. Our security, having a security at every one of our elementary schools, not for the purpose of disciplining students, because I got an email regarding that. This is for supporting students in that building, as we know that we have issues in communities. And so this is really about the safety of staff and students, not so much the disciplining or the quote unquote policing of students. That's not what this is about. It's about strictly security. Mrs. Jones just mentioned the notion of January 20th, that we want to make sure that we have people in all of our buildings to support what needs to happen. Mrs. Jones also raised the notion around custodians, the fact that we have less custodians in large buildings. The intent is that we will have enough custodians, 3 in every single one of our buildings, to accommodate what needs to happen, especially our elementary schools, when there are only 2. One comes on in the morning, one comes on in the evening. Also, the notion of having a full-time family community specialist, as we know, wraparound services are incredibly important. So reducing schools gives us the opportunity to support the schools that exist. The notion of opening a K-12 virtual school, a cost of about $1.1 million to do that. Reading teachers at every one of our elementary schools based on STAR assessment data. Not in every school, but the data will determine that. That's about $1.2 million. And quite frankly, another $1.5 million for a paid internship program for all of our seniors. You said based on the new recommendations, Dr. Adams, are you could still be able to do all of this? The answer is 100% no. Not in the level that I have initially put in place, but some adjustments can be tweaked and made. I'm reminded of a comment that Mrs. Fowler made, that a good board can be flexible. A good superintendent can be flexible as well. And so it is my intent to be flexible with the community, with their commitment around pushing into what needs to happen, not just in the St. Louis Public Schools district, but in this entire community around what needs to happen with schools. Mrs. Jones asked me a question as well that resonated with me. Have we done everything possible? My answer, with the exception of 2 schools, is yes. I believe fully that I can go to sleep at night and say we did everything possible to give this community an opportunity and schools an opportunity to step into the plate to do what needed to be done. Have we done that with this community? I would think the answer is partially yes. We did a great job in terms of the community visioning process. But the fact that we did not name schools gives me some pause. And the fact that people are leaning into the degree that they are says to me that it may make sense to look at a larger conversation around this community. And I realize that all board members are not going to agree with me, and that's fine. My job is to make a recommendation. Your job is to make a vote. Thank you.
Dr. Adams, what is your recommendation? When you put options down, it does not necessarily a recommendation. It's just a list of options. What is your ultimate recommendation?
I like the board to have some because I think the dialogue is helpful to me as well as to the board. And so I eliminate 1 and 4. So 2 or 3 would be where I land in terms of a recommendation. But again, I like to hear from the board, and then I can at the end give you my final recommendations. That's okay.
Well, I actually wrote an entire statement, and I would like to read it at some point. Dorothy, if you would direct me, because I think my statement is is related to the vote that I came here planned to make, but also related to all the conversations and visits that we made. So I think it's easier for me just to read the statement than to have a lot of back and forth conversations about it.
Sure. So I think what I will do at this point, so I'm going to try to keep this transparent, but also making sense. Dr. Adams mentioned at one point, I do not support 1 and 4. So I'm going to read what those options are just so that anyone listening is aware of what that means. So as presented by Dr. Adams, option 1, which is what was presented publicly, all 11 schools, those schools being Clay, Cleveland, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Hickey, Monroe, Northwest, Sumner, and Carnahan transition to a middle school. So option 1 is all of those schools would close. Option 4 is to keep all schools open as they are today. So essentially no change. So I'm putting that out there. I hear you, Regina. We will, let me see if there are any questions first, and then we'll go to that. So are there questions for Dr. Adams?
Yes, I have a question, Dr. Adams. Would you mind speaking to the rationale in option 2, where you state schools that would close would be Clay, Dunbar, Farragut, Ford, Fanning, and then I'm just pulling those out here. And then as relates to option 3, you say remove the 6 elementary schools and then close Northwest, Cleveland, and Carnahan. So essentially moving all the elementary schools off the table, then we would close the high school. So could you just speak a little bit to your rationale behind that, please?
As it relates to item 2, you asked a poignant question to me. Have we done everything for all schools? And I think the first 2 schools you see in option 2, we had not. They had just appeared on the list. There were early childhood numbers that were not in those 2 schools because early childhood numbers or pre-K numbers are lower than they were because we closed the enrollment early because of the fact that the pandemic occurred. And these are communities that normally don't pre-register. So we stopped it and didn't allow any kids to come into these 2 buildings. Their numbers likely would have been as high as 20 to 30 more kids. And that would be my rationale around those two particular schools. Now, that may have affected other schools as well, but it affected these schools much more based upon the information that I have and based upon the data that we looked at. As it relates to option 3, I am clear that we have to close high schools. No ifs and buts about it. I do believe that looking at the other 3 options, looking at the fact that the elementary schools, if we are able to get some support around the things that I put as A, B, or C, it might make sense to leverage this community as it relates to continuing this conversation while we look at keeping these schools open for at least another year to garner some support in the areas that we've all talked about. I think one of the alderwomen put in the public arena yesterday some views about TIFs and tax incentives, and we've had conversations with some of the elected officials about that. And so I think that's a critical piece. The overall plan, I think, is important. I think the plan is less likely to impact the high school than it will be the elementary schools. And so that is my rationale around that piece. I am tied to the ABC part of option 3 happening. I don't think we can guarantee anything, but I think it keeps the door open for further detailed conversations with this community, especially with those persons who can make some decisions in this space. You know, I may come back to you. It would be my intent that would happen over the next 6 months, that we will be coming back to have a conversation with this community in early October relative to what we've heard, what we've seen, and it might be possible, Ms. Jones, there may be even more names on the list than what we had before. I am not, and I am not believing that we're going to get 10,000 kids coming next week. I am not naive about that proposition, but I do think there may be some much more detailed conversation that will address the TIF and tax incentive piece, and it can be an overall plan that might impact what we are thinking about doing.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Adams, for that. So you mentioned in your statement 5 schools. There's no doubt in your mind that we need to close 5 schools. So when you say that, I'm wondering, is there a certain target or dollar amount that you're looking that we need to hit that we're going to save if 5 schools are closed? Or if that's not the case, do you have, like, if you could prioritize a list of schools that should be closed, what would that look like for you?
It would be the 5 schools that are listed in option 3.
Option 3. So it would be Northwest, Cleveland, and Carnahan. You said option 3.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
But you said 5 schools.
No, I think you said 5 schools. I said option 3 would be the Northwest, Cleveland, Carnahan, and obviously the delay for Sumner until March 2021.
Okay, so I heard you incorrectly when you said no doubt we should close 5 schools.
No, the schools that I would be recommending in option 3 would be Northwest, Cleveland, Carnahan, with an extension of time for Sumner with the feedback that we received through the sessions. And the 6 elementary schools will remain open.
So you would lean more towards option 3.
No, you asked me to explain option 3. I haven't leaned.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me rephrase it.
Okay.
So in my understanding, when you were just talking, if I heard you correctly, I may have misheard you. You said that there's no doubt we need to close 5 schools. Did I hear that correctly?
No. So option 3 indicates 4 schools. Option 2 indicates 8 schools.
Hi, okay, thank you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm mishearing. Okay, thank you for
yes,
that.
Yes,
All
high
right.
school. Okay,
That makes more sense. Thank you, Dr. Adams.
you're welcome.
I hate to ask this on the spot, and I don't know if it's possible, so
And
I'm gonna put it out there. Is there any way we
I'm
can
sorry.
put this on this screen?
I
For
forgot,
the,
under option 3, Fanning would also be there, and that's not on, Fanning would also be there as well. It's not on your sheet, but if you add option 3, Fanning as well, that would be Northwest, Cleveland, Carnahan, and Fanning as well.
so with this being such a decision that the community is so heavily invested in, and since we're referencing option numbers, is there any way we can, I'm sorry, somehow find a way?
I will email it to Mrs. Van Oy, who can then email it. Okay, she can do it, she said.
Thank you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that.
That's okay.
Can I talk to you for a minute?
Questions? Are there other board members that have questions?
I have a question, and it relates to option 3. I'd like Dr. Adams to first explain what power do all the persons have through a resolution?
0.
Okay. For B, the coordinated plan to address TIFs and tax abatement. How many school district representatives do we have in place to even impact a plan?
I think we have 3. I want to say 2 or 3.
And the total number of participants on that committee?
Don't quote me. I think the numbers are 9, 9 or 10 or 11. We have we are small. We have a small representation on the TIF committee, but aldermen do have the ability, from my understanding, to recommend something or not to recommend something as it relates to a tax incentive or tax abatement.
This is Natalie. Just a point of clarity. We have 2 out of the 9 representatives on the TIF commission.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. Thank you. Ms. Fowler, I'm sorry, not Ms. Fowler.
Okay. And so has there been any opportunity to even put a citywide plan for schools? Because to me, that sounds like we're talking about having a conversation and some collaboration between SLPS and charters. Is that what this is referencing?
I think it's a larger conversation, quite frankly, Dr. Roberts. This is really not about charters. There are universities that authorize. There's ability for some newly elected officials to frame what the city would want to do. And I think there's some influence there, whether it's a bully pulpit or the reality of changing some things. And let me be clear about it. I don't have a definite that this is going to happen, and I am hopeful, and that's what you're getting in option 3. But there's no guarantee that it can happen, and that's why there's an option 2 and an option 3.
Can we do the PowerPoint where option 2 and option 3 are side by side versus on different slides?
Sure, we'll work on that right now. Sure.
So I'm going to take a moment, if we could, until we get this up on the screen, because I want to make sure that we can all be fully engaged in the conversation. So we'll just take a moment or two while we're working to get this on the screen for you. And then the board will go back to questions, and then once all initial questions have been addressed, we'll come back to some discussion.
You should have it on the screen now.
Okay, so we have it on the screen. Are there additional questions from the board? Not that you can't ask more later, but do you have initial questions?
Yes. Dr. Adams, you met with a bunch of groups, and I know particularly with Sumner, there are many stakeholder groups that were able to talk to you. Could you, and one, thank you to the community for reaching out and being engaged in this process and wanting to have that conversation about solutions and resources. Could you speak to some of those suggestions, resources that have led to the considerations of the delay in that decision, just so the community is more aware of what might be bubbling up for potential plans for Sumner?
The delay for Sumner entails some conversation with Harris Stowe. It also entails some conversations with the art group that has already leveraged some resources that they want to look at with the school. The alumni group are willing to put their alumni dollars on the table as well to support what might need to happen in the school. Those are the 3 biggies as it relates to the Sumner group. But those are the 3 things that are saying to me that I need to extend the time to continue some of these conversations. There just simply wasn't enough time to conclude everything based on the days that we put out there. But those are the three big things. Some effort to actually provide staff this summer from the arts group, some effort to look at the building differently from Harrisville University.
Dr. Adams, thank you for all your hard work on this plan. Of course, I like option 4, that's keeping all the schools open. I did go and visit all the schools, I think. Yeah, I went to visit all of them. And I must say, I was so disappointed in many of the buildings because many of them were filled, they were clean, but they were filled with old decrepit furniture that needed to be replaced back in 1960. They still had paint on them that looked like it was from the 1960s. And this city here, this city of St. Louis, it's criminal the way that they have treated St. Louis Public Schools. And it's no reason why we should be in the predicament that we are in to even have to choose to close the schools or what have you, or we don't have better options. I keep hearing everybody on the news talk about the criminal element in the city of St. Louis, but it's almost criminal the way that the administration downtown has treated our school system, the way that they have allocated money away from our school system. We recently had a proposition that was passed that would take $2 million of property taxes monies away from St. Louis Public School KG program that could have easily helped St. Louis Public Schools. But we now have an administration that's leading. We're going to have a new mayor, and I would hope that the citizens of the city of St. Louis make sure that whomever becomes the mayor is somebody that cares about St. Louis Public Schools, that will help with the nurses, that will help with the counselors, that will help with the supplies of the building. Everybody's worried about the soccer stadium. They put money there. They put money in a football stadium. They can throw that money away. But I'm telling you, when I looked at some of the furniture, some of the old benches looked like they were from 1927. It looked like Papa John had made the benches. They were so old. And I just couldn't believe it, that we have not invested. If my children were still young, because I had 7 to go to St. Louis Public School, some of them, I would be so ashamed that I would not want them to go to that school because of the way that it looked inside. Our schools, like I said before, look like Taj Mahal, and they don't. This is a beautiful building that we're in. Clyde C. Miller is a beautiful building. Carnahan is a nice building, but a lot of the other buildings, they need some tender, loving care, and like right now. And that's the to build up the St. Louis County schools, and our children want to go somewhere where they can go take swimming, where they can get all the electives. We're sending all our tax dollars to that part of town, and while North St. Louis dies on the vine. So I'm saying, wow, you keep looking at you want to get rid of the Black and brown children and talk about the crime element in the city of St. Louis, but my goodness, we have so many criminals walking around in suits, it's ridiculous, that have gone on and taken money that did not belong to them, that have put blood in this street by denying our children the proper money for education. There's no reason why we should have to suffer like this and make these kind of choices. So I already know that I'm for not closing any of the schools, and I really would have enjoyed the ideal of the citywide plan, because I think this is something that we really need. And everybody that stepped forward, we saw tons of email going to Dr. Adams of everybody saying they wanted to do this and that. But I really hope you guys step forward and help Dr. Adams with these plans that you said that you would do. I'm emotional about it, and I hope other people will be too. I've gone to too many funerals of our students here in the city of St. Louis, and I'm sure many of them didn't get the education that they needed. Thank you.
Well, after that long statement, I think it's time that I make my statement as well.
I still
Okay.
have questions.
Okay.
Dr. Adams, could you, I know we don't have this up there, and I'll read it just again to tag on to Donna's point about making sure that the city as a whole is involved. Is it possible to get A, B, and C up there? Because I think that is an important piece to option 3. And A, B, and C with it is saying that this option is tied to the ask that our civic leadership get involved with alderpersons putting a resolution forward to have a moratorium on new schools until there is a citywide plan, have a plan to address TIFs and tax abatements, and movement to develop a citywide plan for schools with the new mayor that must be in place by fall 2021. So I just want to make sure that, again, it's attached to that so that people know, well, they can see what we see, one. But we know that that's part of it. So the heart of option 3, I believe, is to take advantage of and really work with the engagement that we've seen thus far since we've been having, these meetings. People have been sending emails and coming to the table, and allow us to develop a strong partnership moving forward and really put schools on the forefront. Because like Donna was saying, anytime election comes up, anytime anything big is moving in the city of St. Louis, education is left on the back burner, as if we don't have any schools in St. Louis until we have meetings like this and people are coming to the table. So while I just want to restate that I feel like the heart of option 3 is to be able to allow us to center St. Louis Public Schools, put St. Louis Public Schools on the forefront, and not just right now, but moving forward into the future.
I appreciate Adam asking that those be put up, but I just want to make a comment as you guys see those things, is asking for engagement with our officials, our elected officials. The fact of the matter is that myself and several of us were in all those meetings, and the engagement wasn't near as what you would have thought it would have been with our public officials. And most of these things, one, there is no real meat to the moratorium, the resolution for a moratorium. 2, the TIFs and tax abatement, since they're already out there, they are so far out into the future that we are talking a long-term, that's a long-term solution, which I agree with, except it doesn't affect us with the decision we have to make today. And I agree we need a citywide plan, but I think my statement addresses that, and I would like to say that, make my statement now. And on Facebook, people say caution, long post, so I say caution, long statement. First, before I begin, I want to thank the St. Louis community at large and our community partners, educators, parents, and students who made their voices heard over the last few months regarding the school closing decision. While I was unable to participate in the public forums when this subject began almost 2 years ago, because I was not a school board member at that time, I did read all of your comments and emails that came in over the last few months, which are over 1,000. I also listened to all the Zoom or Microsoft meeting sessions with elected officials, community partners, school alumni, and school staff. Of course, some of our partners preferred to have conversations that did not include the elected board members listening in, and that's fine. Also, finally, I toured most of the schools recommended for closure. I want to pause to say thank you to the following elected officials: the Honorable Alderpersons Megan Green, Dwayne Evans, Alderperson Rice, Brandon Bosley, Alderman Narayan, and Christina Ingracia. We need to hear from our alderpersons, and I greatly appreciate those who took the time to speak with Dr. Adams and allow the school board members to listen in on the calls. I want to give special thanks and acknowledgement to the Honorable State Senator Kim Gardner, who also met with Dr. Adams. And finally, to the St. Louis city candidate for mayor who took out time to talk with us about solutions, the Honorable Alderperson Kara Spencer. Let's be clear, the St. Louis Public Schools will only reach its full potential and provide the type of education our students deserve if our elected officials participate in the process of creating those solutions to make us better. So again, I want to thank the elected officials who did listen to, hear, make comments, and also offer ideas and solutions. I understood when we delayed our decision last month that I absolutely needed to listen to those impacted by this decision and to those that have ideas that maybe we had not considered. It is from all the comments, meetings, even complaints, recommendations, and ideas that I came to my vote tonight. And however, I understand that maybe we won't be voting on what we thought we were voting on. Before I vote, however, it is important for me to share some of my thoughts about all that I heard and read these last months. One of the first concerns I heard loud and clear is too many neighborhood schools are recommended to be closed. I will be honest, early on, I concluded that was not as valid a point as one might think. The majority of our families have already chosen schools outside of their neighborhoods, either by sending their children to magnet schools within St. Louis Public School System, participating in the voluntary busing to county schools, or attending charter schools. This does not include those families within the city who have made the choice to send their children to private schools. Almost 45 years ago, school choice was introduced to the St. Louis Public School System with the magnet school program. As a matter of fact, I made the choice 44 years ago to leave Sodan High School to attend the now closed Academy of Mathematics and Science. I also made the choice to send my children to magnet schools instead of Hempstead or Mitchell, the schools in my neighborhood at that time. The majority of my fellow board members have also made similar choices. To save all of our neighborhood schools, we will have to eliminate some of the educational choices our families have. But right now, our families have said loud and clear that choice is here to stay. Just for information, the highest percent of students who live in the neighborhoods and attend the schools recommended for closure is 34%. In other words, most families in those neighborhoods have made the choice to attend schools outside of their local St. Louis Public School. The next concern I have was that I heard was that closing the schools reduces neighborhood property values and degrades neighborhoods. I'm not convinced fully of this argument. You see, the neighborhood I grew up in and where my husband and I bought our first home in the city of St. Louis had Mitchell Elementary on the east of us, and I believe it was Clark Elementary on the west, right at Hamilton, north of Delmar. Clark has been closed for a very long time. However, new homes were constructed in that neighborhood. And as I rode by there just last week on my return to my home, I saw the rehabilitation of housing almost directly across the street from that old dilapidated school. It is my belief that more than schools in every city neighborhood, we need housing and business development in our neighborhoods. I do not believe St. Louis Public School is charged with neighborhood development and housing property values. This is a challenge for our local and state elected officials, along with the residents of the city of St. Louis. Our city recently developed a 10-year city plan that did not include our schools and our children. The plan focused on the Central West End and South St. Louis City at the exclusion of North St. Louis City. We spoke with a few developers who have plans to develop certain North Side neighborhoods, which I'm very delighted about. However, most of them are counting on using TIFs and tax incentives for the development, which directly negatively impact the funding of our schools. Our elected officials must do better, and they should have been doing better before this time. They must come with a plan to include substantial North City development without reducing funding for our schools. I was disappointed that more alderpersons and other candidates for mayor did not reach out for a conversation to discuss these issues during the month delay we gave for these discussions. But I am grateful for those who did take their time to speak with us. Finally, I heard the community partners, alumni, students, and educators all were very passionate about either their former or current schools or neighborhoods. I do appreciate that passion. As a matter of fact, I've addressed the St. Louis Public School Board in past times as a former St. Louis Public School student, resident, and parent. I get it. We had some community partners who want us to stop everything and start this process over. I say to those, instead of starting over, go through what has already been done and help us with solutions instead. Many other partners, alumni, educators did come up with great ideas and possible solutions. It is those ideas and solutions that provide the silver lining in all of this. There are solid ideas and solutions that are available to us now. However, most of those solutions ideas will take as little as 2 years and as long as more than 5 years to implement. Starting next month or so, Dr. Adams will be setting up formal meetings to discuss those ideas and solutions offered and which ones should be implemented and how they can be implemented. These ideas and solutions can still save some of the school buildings and still help our neighborhoods. I hope the elected officials, teachers, students, and community partners who spoke with us this past month will participate on that committee and help make St. Louis Public Schools better. Now my thoughts about the decision that is slated to be made tonight. As I started through all the comments, emails, texts, and meeting notes, I came to the conclusion that as a St. Louis Public School board member, my duty is to the students we have now and the future of our district. We must make our decision based on providing the best education to our students, understanding the financial, community, and political constraints we operate under. St. Louis Public Schools has huge constraints, but we still have to offer the best education possible for our students. Dr. Adams proposed school improvements that go along with the closures. The improvements recommended are very important to our students. Full-time nurses and social workers, a job readiness program for our high school seniors, and additional reading coaches at our schools, just to name a few. My vote tonight will be a result of those improvements as well as all the information I just outlined. Now, I did spend the last couple of weeks, about a week and a half, preparing this. So I was very disappointed to come to the meeting, well, to be faced with this just about 3 hours ago, maybe, that instead of having a solid recommendation, we're going to have a discussion about multiple options. I do believe that we have to be flexible. And I do feel like, based on Susan's request last time, that we look at all the schools and make sure we consider everything. I can understand removing Hickey and Monroe based on additional information given to us by Dr. Adams. However, if we're going to delay a decision for our public officials to come up with a plan, I think we're fooling ourselves. They just finished a 10-year plan that didn't include us, the school system. We need our citizens our residents of the St. Louis city to start pounding on their doors. Instead of them sending us mail about being elected, we should be sending them comments about our schools. But whatever they do, it's going to take some time. They're not going to do this immediately. So the school closing decision is a result of much delay that's already occurred. But my fear is that all of those positive things that Dr. Adams has addressed, saying that our students would get, my fear delaying this decision too long or any more will be to the detriment of those benefits and ultimately to the detriment of our students. I can support option 2. I cannot support option 3 with the idea that our elected officials are going to all of a sudden come up with the plan when they're operating on a 10-year plan that did not include us.
Okay, well, I will speak. It seems to me that we know the recommendations for the upgrades or the improvements are tied to school closures. Not tied to school closures, but this relationship of the number determines how much we can offer our students. And our students do deserve the very best. There are many of those things on the list that as a board, we have said over and over and over again over the past, depending on how long you've been here, 4, 8, 12, however many years. This idea of giving more GOB funds to individual school budgets that they can allocate in a way that fits their school community, providing additional electives so students can be competitive as they graduate high school and move into the job market or into college. This idea of having nurses, counselors, social workers, safety professionals in every one of our school buildings. These are all things that we have said as a board that we want and that we believe that our students deserve. And absolutely, yes, we are at this moment because of disinvestment from the city. But as I've said to you all numerous times, we are the only elected officials who solely represent the interests of children. And while I believe a million % that those items A, B, and C must be done, I don't know how we can, in good conscience, being the only elected officials that represent children, tie our own timeline to those external things. I am hopeful that regardless of what happens tonight, we as a board and the city of St. Louis will rally around those things just solely because it's the right thing to do. But if we don't close schools tonight, in March, whenever, our children are going to suffer. We are not going to be able to provide them with the things that they deserve and the things that we've said as a board we want them to have. So for me, it's difficult to tell children, if there were children here, if this were in non-COVID times, we would have a packed house. And I don't know that I could say you don't deserve these upgrades we want to provide to you. And one of the things that's really been sticking with me as have gone through this process and read all the comments, is we have heard from everyone, whether they are a school that is on this list or not, how much they love their school. We toured all 11 schools on the list. It was clear to me in every single one of those buildings that the staff cared about their children, that there was a family atmosphere in all of those buildings. So this isn't about this idea of closures is not a reflection of who these children are or who the staff is. It's a reflection of a larger systemic problem. And yes, this is all tied together, and I don't know how you sort it out, but we do have an obligation to provide quality education to all of our children. And we know it's not these schools that have caused this. It's why we took academic performance off the table. It's why we shifted around the scoring matrix that this board approved. It's not about this thing that happens inside, because we know there's love there, but we can do better, and we know we can do better. And once you know you're not providing what you could be, I don't want to see our kids suffer because we're tying ourselves to other elected officials who have ignored us forever.
Dr. Adams, could you speak to so the upgrades that you presented in our past meetings as relates to what our schools would now have access to if some of these schools were to close? Do you have figures on hand or a roundabout figure of what the cost of the upgrades would be like in general, and then versus the cost of if we were to close schools this evening, like the savings that would be, like the savings of the amount of schools, the savings that we would save for the schools that would be closed versus the cost of upgrades, what does that look like?
So for the support for the recruitment specialist, $50,000. For increased all school site budgets, $500,000. For title, $0, because it would be equal. For the, and all of these are estimates, I want to be clear about it. Nurses, $60,000. We would need to hire one more nurse. Counselors, there would not be any impact there because we will close schools and there would be enough to share. Social workers, again, no cost. Reduction of schools would mean that they would be able to be supported at other schools. Security, $345,000. Custodians, keeping the same number would not be a cost because we're closing buildings and be dispersed out of the buildings. Family community specialists, $0 to do that. Because of the closings, it's a natural saving. For the creating of a K-12 virtual school, approximately $1.1 million. For the coaches, not coaches, but reading, additional reading teachers in elementary schools, $1.2 million. For the paid internship program, about $1.5 million, for a total of about $4.75 million. In terms of what would be available to us, again, I want to be really careful outside of the administrative costs and the secretarial costs. That's what we count. There are still some idiosyncrasies around transportation and utility costs that would be also. So for all schools closing, utility costs about $1.5 million. For For the administrative costs, about $1.5 million. And then there are other costs as well. So about $3 million for all of those things, not counting some other small things. My budget person warns me about giving any kind of estimates about school closing because it's just so difficult to put a handle on. But we believe that we would have enough dollars to support the upgrades based upon the schools that are closing. There may be some shifts because we may have to look at title dollars a little bit different. We may have to look at CARES dollars a little different, but there's some ways to kind of move some things around.
Dr. Adams, did you say since 2003, we've closed 43 schools,
47 schools.
47 schools?
Yes, ma'am.
And yet we are still on a downward spiral. And if we continue in the same frame we're going now, we'll probably be closing more in another couple of years.
I would think without some kind of overall plan, the answer to the question is yes.
Okay.
I remember when I started this conversation, I said I could have recommended 20 schools.
So Dr. Adams, to confirm, when those, over the years when those schools were closed, I would assume that there were also some perks that would have come out of that or some savings. And out of those savings would have been money back into the district, correct?
So the district started with a $66 million deficit. So part of the closing at that time was about saving the district from the financial strengths that it had. So I would suspect that part of the closing, and I was a part of it in 2009, was just to balance the budget, just to save. We're at a different point now in terms of having a surplus. So this is not about survival in that sense. This is about actually providing some additional services as opposed to just trying to survive. So in 2003, as you are aware, there were a lot of financial challenges, and those financial challenges continue.
So I just wanted to take a moment to respond to President Rhodey Collins and Ms. Fowler's comments. I mean, I hear you. I completely understand where you're coming from. I think that and I've already said this, but as it relates to public education in the city of St. Louis, we're, you know, for lack of a better term, the redheaded stepchild of city officials, of focus of our city. And I think at some point it has to change. I think if we continue to expect that we won't get help and we continue to act under the assumption that we're not actually going to get the support that we need and deserve, and we will, you know, continue to act in that way, and we won't be able to release that. That's just going to be our mode of operating when we don't have support. So every decision we make is going to be independent of the city. And I think that independence is not going to help us move forward in the way that we want to. I do believe that, yeah, we are at a critical place right now where we have people who are coming to the table, that we have elected officials and city officials that are paying attention. And whether or not they were before, yes, we have to take that into account, but I think we should acknowledge where we are right now and where we want to be. We definitely have some trauma from being put last on the agenda of the city. And you said something in your note, Ms. Fowler, you said we are not charged with developing neighborhoods, and that's absolutely true. But we are intricately linked and almost dependent on neighborhood development. And, you know, Dorothy, you said that, you know, we shouldn't be fixated on our link or dependence on elected officials to do what they need to do. But because we are a public education entity, we are, whether we want to be or not, we are, because the way that we're funded, it's by butts in seats. That's how we get our funding. Private schools, they can put as many or as little kids in the students in the seats as they want because they're not funded through the state. So because we are funded by the number of students in the seats, and that's how we fully fund our schools, we could have a school right now with 50 kids and we can say, well, we want 50 teachers in there. Well, we can't say that because of how our funding works. And because we're tied to the number of students, that directly relates to the number of available students that there are in a neighborhood. So we can say that we're not we don't want to depend on them, or we're not intricately linked, but we are. And I think that's something that we have to, at some point, if we just continue or have the mindset that we'll just keep keeping along, and then maybe something will change, or we're going to act independently. And then hopefully down the road, someone says, oh, schools are important. Let's put that at the top of the agenda. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there is an option here, an opportunity here to be able to cultivate what we have now and springboard that forward. That being said, I do understand that we don't want to put all of our eggs in the basket of our city officials, and we do need to, as a group of 7, make the best decision that we can. I would just not want to perpetuate this language that we need to completely write off elected officials, that we need to completely write off the city and assume or expect that they are not going to come to the table as we need them to, because they haven't historically. When things change, they have to change at some point. I just think, why not this point? And maybe if it's not this point, maybe it's in 3 years, 5 years, but if we continually expect that it will never change, then it won't.
So I want to make sure that my remarks are very clear here. So I do not want to see us tie our timeline to an external timeline. So a resolution that is non-binding on a moratorium, I don't even believe can come before the board until February. To create a plan that somehow then gets approved to address TIFs and tax abatements could take who knows how long. A citywide plan, again, this city moves very slowly, particularly when it comes around education. So I don't want us to tie our timeline and what our kids deserve to an external timeline. But let me make very clear that I expect, regardless of which option this board adopts, that those 3 things will be first and foremost on the list of every single person in this city to hold every single elected official in this city accountable for, because those 3 things are the exact right thing to do. So those things are non-negotiable for me, regardless of what we do.
And I want to clarify mine too, because if in my statement, actually, I called for action for our elected officials, and I called for action for our residents to, start calling them. And I will say that we have 4 candidates for mayor that I'm aware of. I think every last one of them should have made the attempt to contact us and to have that conversation so that we can hear what they're saying. Only one did that. So my fear is that we'll choose an option with the idea that they are going to do something. I think the push for them to do something is going to come from us as residents of the city, and it's going to come from the other people who live in the city, and we need to push hard. So I am calling for that action so that these 3 things are absolutely done. Before we had the delay, my thoughts on the vote was very different than what it is today. I mean, I have made a complete 180-degree turnaround. And the reason I made that turnaround, a lot of it was because of what I heard. Long-term plans, things that were not even solidified, like, using Section 8 vouchers to develop an area when the developer didn't even understand Section 8 vouchers. I'm on the board of the Housing Authority. Hearing that TIFs were going to fund everything, hearing that people were talking about the same plans, but they had conflicting information on what those plans were. At the present time, we are faced with making the decision it's absolutely important that our board becomes more active in pushing and pressuring our elected officials to do more for our schools. So I don't discount that. Dr. Roberts talked about how much she attends these meetings and stuff. That's something we all have to do now to push our elected officials, but then we also have to get out there to our residents to make sure they understand that they have a voice in what our elected officials decide to do. So I don't want, like Dorothy, I don't want to exclude those A, B, and C options here. Those are critical to the future of our city, because a city that has a poor school district, that city can't stand as strongly as they should over time. So I'm all for that, but I want to make sure I clarify that I'm not against doing this. I'm absolutely for it. Matter of fact, I think we need to push hard that we do these three things, but not at the expense of our students who need help now.
This is my last statement in regards to that. I know I talked about elected officials and I've been talking about them for a long time, but I'm looking forward to companies like Centene that have made millions of dollars here in the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County. And they were very concerned about expansion and crime and that kind of thing. And please consider president or the owner of Centene to invest in St. Louis Public School. And I'm pleading with other companies that are spending billions of dollars in this city, Square. Please take your money and invest it in our students. They are very deserving and you can't go wrong. And if you want to curb crime, invest in education. Thank you.
I just have a few comments to make. We started this discussion last year. We did the visioning. We came back in December and decided it was a recommendation was placed on the table then. And this is an opportunity for us to begin to reimagine schools. We hear those words all the time. We hear equity all the time. We hear well-being all the time. We don't have the resources available for us at this time to support our children the way they need to be supported. I ran for this board so that I could bring a voice from working directly with kids. And so they need the resources. I heard one, Miss Donna say that she toured the buildings and the furniture was old. And so we haven't had a capital improvement operation for buildings to be painted. I passed by a building and there were trees growing up the front of the building. And so there is some responsibility on our elected officials. The schools never left the community. Choice is what brought us to this place now. If you chose to leave your neighborhood so that your children could have some more options, I respect that. But I take exception to holding our families who stayed in the community with their children, and now they don't have everything that they need, and we're stuck on what to do based on alderpersons and a resolution, because resolutions mean nothing to the state. The state is the body that determines new schools. The TIFs and tax abatements, we get outvoted all the time. There's only 2 or 3 representatives on there, and there's a 9-member board. And the citywide plan for schools, who's going to lead that effort? And so I'm standing on what's good for kids. That's been my position from being a classroom teacher to central office. And some decisions are difficult, but some decisions are right. And so I hope we can move forward with the goal.
Check in with Natalie. Natalie, is there anything you want to say or ask?
Yeah. So I just had a couple of thoughts as this process was unraveling. There are a lot of people who wanted us to delay this decision, and I think that we gained a lot from listening to those groups and individuals who, especially the ones who are offering to bring resources to prevent the trajectory of St. Louis Public Schools' further decline. I would like to know exactly what electives we will be adding. I know that on our wish list, there was talk of offering the same electives across high schools for a more equitable education opportunity, no matter what your zip code is, no matter where you live, that your neighborhood high school would offer the same things as neighboring schools across town. Specifically, that Northside schools would still have those same options as Southside schools. So I would like some information on that if you care to share in a bit, Dr. Adams. But the other thing that's become clear, and just through my personal experiences, is that waiting itself is a form of trauma. Whether we're going to close schools or keep them all open, I feel like we have to have a very clear plan on when that decision is going to happen. And if we keep kicking it down the road 6 months or 12 months and no one has a definitive date in time in mind, we're causing stress to those families to not have a choice, to not be able to make an informed decision on what they're going to do next. They're going to keep waiting, and we're going to keep saying, oh, maybe we're going to decide. I don't want to rush into this decision, and I feel like we haven't, and we might need more time, and that's fine. But I don't want to keep having everyone in the community say, okay, they're deciding on December 15th. Okay, they're deciding on January 12th, because we are causing active trauma to our families and our students who don't know what their future is going to look like, who can't start planning their options. Maybe they do want to move out of the district, but you know, that is their choice, and that is something that we need to be honest with them about. And I too am really hesitant to close anything until we have a moratorium on charter schools. And right now I'm not familiar with any legislation that has been filed at the state level. And as it has been mentioned, a resolution from the Board of Aldermen is non-binding and carries almost zero weight in the state legislature, to be honest. So we really need to reach out to state legislators who will be champions for this cause. Yes, it is absolutely the city who needs to get behind us on this, but we have to be able to interface with state legislators who understand this. We have to have some influence, and we need to keep going to Jefferson City as well as City Hall. So those are just a few thoughts that I have that I wanted to add. And if Dr. Adams, if you have those electives chosen yet, or if we have any idea where that's going, I would really like to hear that. If not, I understand that there is a lot up in the air, but yeah, do you have any information on that?
So the report I provided to the board indicates that if the high schools close, we will move from 100 AP offerings to 104, and from 317 electives to 352 electives for the remaining high schools that open, because those electives will be shifted there. An example would be the school we're in right now has 27 electives for the 2021 school year. Next year would have 40 electives. A school like Collegiate will go from 10 to 16. A school like Gateway will go from 25 to 48. School like McKinley will go from 26 to 38. School like Metro will go from 18 to 26, and I could go on. We have some analysis of what it looks like. Obviously, the devil's in the details in terms of certification, but we see an increase in electives and an increase in AP courses at selected schools. And I can provide you with the electronic copy of this document.
So I guess I'm kind of wondering, I guess that would also include extracurricular programs. Will every school have a choir, a marching band, a basketball team, or will those still be considered, concentrated in certain areas, certain schools?
Choir and band depends a great deal on finding certified staff. It's not been an issue of schools wanting to include those. They just have not been able to find a certified staff to do that. As it relates to the extracurricular activities, meaning sports, again, that is determined by the number of kids in the building who want to participate. All schools are looking to do that. The ones that are difficult are schools like, wrestling. A lot of our kids are not interested in wrestling, but the sports programs all depend upon the interest of kids. It's not that we don't want to offer it. We have to find coaches and enough kids interested in those particular efforts. As I said earlier tonight, many of our sports programs are not going on right now because of the pandemic, because there are not enough kids, and the kids don't want to do the constant testing that takes place.
Sure. I guess I'm just wondering if we're going to be shuffling kids around and some schools are going to close, if those interests could change, and how quickly we'd be able to adapt to make sure that the kids who are interested in these things are accommodated.
Yeah, I think the sooner we make a decision, the more likely it is to try to move forward in terms of trying to get to kids and families to decide what high schools they want to go to. High school is a little bit different because of the transportation piece, but we will do our best to offer all of these additional opportunities. But once we get to some decisions, then I can give you a better idea probably before the end of the school year, exactly what is going to be possibly offered based on the population.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
I just want to add to that, as long as we delay this decision, we also delay the next step, which is sitting down with community, elected officials, parents, teachers, et cetera, to talk about what do we do with some of these schools. When we sat in on many of the conversations, there were some really good ideas, and maybe they weren't necessarily the ideas weren't all about, offering math, science, English and stuff, but some of those programs were talking about, offering our students and our residents the ability to learn more about technology and using these buildings for other things. Because we make the decision, when we make the decisions to close or not close, whatever decision is going to be, but if we make the decision to close, we have so many more opportunities to provide an impact to some of our most depressed communities. Sumner's alumni were on fire about ideas, but then there are other supporters too that agree with those. The longer we delay the decision, the longer we delay our ability to really be innovative about what happens to some of these buildings in the neighborhoods.
Are there any other board members who would wish to speak at this time?
Dr. Adams, from your standpoint and budget feasibility, how likely do you think it would be under option 2 to be able to provide a majority, if not all of the list of recommended upgrades that you listed before?
High likelihood. High likelihood.
Are there any other board members who wish to speak? So I'm going to present kind of the way, some things for you to think through as you think about how motion might be made, but then I also have some comments just specifically to the board. So there is an item on our consent agenda as it pertains to this recommendation. So a motion could be made to approve, as we do every other consent agenda item. A person could make a motion that said, I move that we approve this item number. A person could also say, I move to amend item number, and then reflect how you want that change to be made. So in order to be completely transparent and clear, I would request that you not make a motion as, adopting option 1, 2, or 3, 4, but to use these options to propose an amendment to the consent agenda item. So regardless of the way that the motion is made, it would need a second. We could have further discussion, and then there would need to be a vote. In the event that a vote for the first motion did not pass, or if there is no second, there can be another motion for something different. So as you're thinking about that, I just want to share this with you all. So I want to thank my fellow board members for tackling this very difficult, complex, and emotional decision with grace and thoughtfulness. There have been years and years of disinvestment in our city and in our district, which have led us to this moment tonight. Working alongside you, I've seen you all spend countless hours reading materials, touring schools, asking questions, sitting in meetings, making suggestions, engaging with the community, and thinking through the many possibilities and what opportunities they bring to our children. Regardless of the outcome of this vote, I am proud of the way of this board and the way that you all have handled this immense pressure and magnitude of the decision. I'm proud to work alongside Dr. Adams in this district to provide the best opportunities for our children. So thank you all. Regardless of how the vote goes, it's been an honor to work through this with you all and to see the time that you have put into this decision. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the consolidation plan presented to us with the following amendment.
that we remove Hickey School, Monroe School, and we delay the decision on
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part? The sound dropped. I heard Hickey and Monroe and then delay what? I'm sorry, Regina.
So I'll repeat it back. The motion was made to consent agenda item 1215-2001 to remove the names Hickey and Monroe and to state to delay the decision on Sumner until March 2021. And it received a second.
Thank you.
Are there further questions, discussion?
Yes, Dorothy, I'm
Yep.
confused because so option 4 is out. I can't vote on keeping all the schools open. You're just gonna do 2 and 3?
So I made no motion. The way for this to be, because this is a consent agenda item, it needs to be addressed as is. Or by address, I mean voted. It needs to be voted on as is, or it needs to be amended. So the motion on the floor, which was seconded, was to remove the names Hickey, Monroe, and then state that the decision for Sumner would be delayed until March 2021.
Right, but
So
it's still not
we-
giving me an option to vote, to have my option as well as the other board members. You got, on this piece of paper, it says option 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So that's correct. But there has to be a motion for a vote to take place.
So the agenda item is on the table. So if you're for, then you would just be against the current one.
That's correct. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, if you do not approve of the consent agenda item as amended, I'm sorry, we have to vote on the amendment first. Okay, so there's an amendment on the floor. This amendment needs to be discussed. So Donna, if you would like to speak against the amendment in favor of some different amendment or something different, this would be an opportunity for you to do that. So we will then vote on the amendment and then on the full motion. Is there anyone who would like to speak on the amendment?
So I have, this is Natalie. I have some concerns about that. I'm also a little concerned about Dunbar and Northwest. There having been no real mention of preserving some of the unique social justice aspects of Northwest or porting them over to another school. And also, if we are really thinking optimistically long-term, and I know that's difficult optimism in the city of St. Louis, what will happen if we do need to open a school, if the NGA does come in and maybe families move there and they want to send their kids there. If Dunbar is not there, we're going to have to do something in that area to satisfy that demand. So just throwing that out there, maybe that's not, for this specific amendment, I'm not necessarily offering anything, but I wanted to know other board members' feelings on that, if we're happy with sacrificing those two and proceeding with this amendment. But those are big issues for me. And I'm not, yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to add that.
Well, I'm sorry, the way that you're presenting it, I want to vote no on, I want to vote for option 4, to keep all schools open as they are today. So the way that you're reframing it and saying it's on the agenda, I guess I don't have the agenda in front of me, huh?
No, you should. So it's,
Oh, okay, well,
I just wanted to comment on what Natalie talked about Northwest. Regarding the criminal justice program, when we visited Northwest, I asked the principal how many students actually continued in criminal justice after leaving the school. He said only 2. And he said they're challenged in getting teachers who can actually teach in the criminal justice arena. They were actually challenged in getting people to come volunteer to work in their moot court. So much so that I called my daughter, who's an attorney, and asked if she would volunteer. So right now that program is challenged anyway considering not many students, only 2 actually continued in that direction. And the issue with getting teachers to really teach that program is very difficult.
There was a reason why it was challenged. I mean, the library had big stains in the middle of the carpet, was nasty, and the principal has done everything he can to make that a fine school. But they're, like I said, they have very few resources to offer the students. And I've been up there when school was in session, and they just didn't have what they needed. And if the proper resources were there, then we would have the students that would come to the school and actively participate. So that's not the reason why we had only 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. We need to offer things that children want, and we have not done that. We have not properly marketed those programs in that building.
So Regina, I'd just like to also add on to that comment. And speaking to the principal at Northwest High School, he also said that they had some issues around marketing for that school. And then also for a very long time, this isn't the first time that this school has been considered for closure, that people don't want to come over to that school because they automatically believe that the school is going to be closed. Hence, nobody wants to be there. And so when you have that type of thought about a place that might not, be around, of course, it's going to, cause less people to want to be involved at that place. But that is a very fine school. I think that there's a lot that could be done at that school. And like Donna said, if we offer the programs that our community wants, hence the programs that a lot of our African-American children would benefit from, engineering programs, a cosmetology program, all these different trades that we can put in a building, we can make another metro in North St. Louis. It doesn't just have to be, and we write them off because of some small things and disinvestment that has happened on purpose in that school.
I'm receiving everyone's comments and how they feel about the school. Marketing is something that we all can do. The school can have a marketing strategy. They can request some assistance from the central office around marketing. And so if we don't have qualified staff or a program, there is no program. If we can't find volunteers who are credentialed in certain curriculum areas, we don't have a program. So it's one thing to say what we should be doing is what we can do. There's been some mention about the NGA. The NGA is a facility that any school in our district can benefit from, not just 2 or 3. And we talk about careers and auto mechanics and building houses. We need people who are credentialed in that. It's not something that just automatically appears. There's a certification issue around many of those things. But we can encourage the community who has expertise in those areas to come in and start an after-school program. Or we can try, or if you know someone who has that credentialing, convince them to join SLPS. But the board is the governing body. We are going to make a decision on a recommendation. We're going to charge our superintendent with coming up with those things that excite kids. There are a lot of things that can be a part of a wraparound after-school program. Community school is not just designated for schools that are identified as full service. Any school can become a community school. The community and the school works together to give kids the kinds of experience and exposures that we all want them to have. But a lot of that, as I indicated, is tied to certifications.
But Joyce, what you just said all ties back to marketing. Again, if somebody thinks the school is going to close, there's not a company, an entity, or an organization that's going to realistically, invest their funds in a place where they don't think that the program is going to last. And so if they knew that that school had a great program, or that they saw some type of promise that their program that they're going to invest into would grow, then I think that we would see something different, and that hasn't been done.
I receive that. And if I go into a school and I see, and I know what a school looks like, feels like, and sounds like,
Yeah.
and someone else goes into a school and says, well, I don't think that school is doing all it can for a school. And I say that they're doing what they can do based on the marketing. Now, they have a website, they have Facebook, Twitter, all of those other kinds of things that I'm told they are using to market the school. And so what are additional marketing strategies do you think can be provided?
Joyce, I'm not the marketing team for SLPS, but I will tell you, just even talking about the brand of SLPS is marketing. Talking about what that school has to offer in general conversation is marketing. It's not just being on social media or sending an email or some type of press release, but simply just talking about it actually, so we could have been showing that those law programs or those cases that they were doing inside those classrooms in live sessions so that people could really see what they were doing inside of those schools. We have so many amazing programs in St. Louis Public Schools in general that just don't get any attention because there's been no attention really brought to it, or maybe it's not hitting the right platform, or maybe the right people are not speaking to that, but it can happen. I just don't want us to get to the place where we're limiting ourselves and just saying, oh, well, because this hasn't happened now, it can't happen. I'm not going to let how I feel about in general, how our elected officials have been in the past and say, well, if it hasn't happened now, it won't happen. Like, I believe that we can be number one in this nation, and we're going to have to be open-minded to make that happen in such a way that when these things do come up, we're not just like, okay, we're going to write everybody off. Like, I think that some of these schools definitely deserve a chance. They do. And they haven't been given a chance, because if you look at the track record of a lot of these schools and you speak to the principals, they say, I put in a request for this. And Joyce, I've talked to you about this before. You said, Susan, I put in a request for this and it didn't happen. And so the question is, well, dang, was this by plan that it didn't happen and then now we're at this place, or what was the problem?
I have to agree with you. I have worked at the building level, and there were some things that needed to be done, but that didn't stop the school family from creating an environment that school kids could still thrive in.
This is Natalie. Just to follow up on what Susan said about the marketability and how people perceive whether they should invest in a school or not. I think that is kind of key, because a lot of these schools have been discussed for closure before. They have been proposed, and it's always an on again, off again. And if we take a school off of this list, I would personally recommend that part of that is that we commit to not reopening discussions on closing that school again for X amount of time. If we really want to keep it open, it shouldn't be, let's keep it open for now. It should be, let's keep it open for 10 years or 5 years and really commit to not seeing it back on the list. What resources can we throw behind that school to make sure that they have everything they need to succeed? It can't just be based on emotions. It can't just be based on what developers might do with some tips if they come in, but really it needs to be a commitment we make to the staff and the students and the families of those schools. So if anything is removed, we need to make sure that we are actually going to stand behind that decision. And it should be something that will outlast any of the board members here or any of the staff members that may be there now. It needs to be a commitment to those schools and those neighborhoods.
You know, I teach personal financial management classes. And one of the things I do with my counselees is go through their dollars and all the things they're trying to do. And one thing I noticed that those who are stretched out the most are the ones who are trying to accomplish so many things because they feel like those things are important, but they only have limited resources. And I feel like that's where we are as a district. We want to do so many things, but we do have limited resources. And for me, if closing these schools will allow us to do those things that are on Dr. Adams' list of improvements, for me, that outweighs so many other things. I teach at one of the local universities, and I would say that, there's a great need for our high schools to focus on some basic skills like reading and writing. And while all those other things are great, if we don't have the budget to really stretch ourselves to do all those things, but by closing these schools, we get reading specialists and other support staff to help these students become better college graduates or career people or work in the technical fields or the trades. I think that would be great. But I think we're in a situation where we're trying to stretch our dollar so far. And what's happening is that we're not being nearly as effective as we can be with a smaller system versus a larger system.
And just to follow up on that, as we continue to discuss is one of the drivers of this. And so I've listened to everyone. I appreciate everyone's passion and their concern. I appreciate those persons who want to who want to delay it. But at the end of all of this, it's still predicated for me on what we can provide to the young people. It's low enrollment. The low enrollment impacts resources. And so as we toured the buildings, one of the main questions I asked, well, how many rooms are in your school? In some instances, there were 31 actual buildings, actual rooms in the building, and maybe 9 classrooms being used. That's not using our resources for the greater good.
Are there any board members who wish to speak on this amendment? So I'm going to read it back one more time. So we will be voting on changing consent agenda item 12-15-2001 to remove Hickey and Monroe and to delay the decision on Sumner until March 2021. Ms. Bell. So this is the amendment only, Ms. Bell.
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane, Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
No.
Ms. Bowell,
No.
Ms. S. Jones, Ms. Rhodey Collins.
No, if you didn't hear me. Yes.
Amendment failed.
So I will entertain another motion. So that could be a motion to adopt the item as is, or it could be a different amendment.
I make the motion to adopt the consolidation and closure proposed school action plan as presented in 12-15-20-01.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion or comments on the amendment, which would be to adopt as is.
Dorothy, can I make an adjustment to that?
To what?
To the second? Can I withdraw the second?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
So there's a motion on the floor to adopt 12-15-2001, which is as listed before you, which is all 11 schools. Is there a second?
Now help me with this. Is it possible for me to add an amendment to that motion?
So if this does not get a second, I will move into a different motion, in which case, yes.
So
there's, I am hearing no second. So Dr. Roberts, would you like to move to make an amendment?
Okay. I'd like to support the motion presented by Ms. Fowler and make the amendment to it that includes A, B, and C under option 3. Is that acceptable?
So make sure I understand, and then I will look at Jeff and he will tell me yes or no. So you are suggesting that we adopt 12-15-2001 as presented, which is all 11 schools, with the understanding that we,
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. No, that's not what my intention is.
I'm just, I want to make sure we're all clear on.
Mhm. That's not my intention.
So what I understood is that the original 12-15-2001 was, there was a motion, there was no second, so that failed. And so at this point in time, if Dr. Roberts would like to make a new motion that relates to what appears to be option 3, is that correct, Dr. Roberts?
Okay.
If you want to tell us what you
Yeah,
want, we can work on the motion.
Let me do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Option 2, with the amendment that would give us flexibility around A, B, and C as identified under option 3.
So are you saying you want to make an amendment to remove Hickey, Monroe, delay Sumner to March 2021, and add alderpersons doing a resolution on the moratorium on new schools, coordinated plan to address TIFs and tax abatements, and movement to develop a citywide action plan for schools?
Yes.
If I could recommend to the board that the motion be for approval of 12-15-2001 with Hickey, Monroe removed, Sumner delayed till March 2021, and with the addition of items A, B, and C. Is that accurate, Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
That would be my recommendation. So that would be your motion, Dr. Roberts. I'll repeat that for you. So your motion, Dr. Roberts, would be moved to approve 12-15-2001. Move to amend, 12-15-2001 to remove Hickey, Monroe, and delay a decision on Sumner till March 2021, and add items A, B, and C from option 3.
Yes.
I'll make a second.
Sorry, questions or discussion on this amendment?
I just have some clarifying questions. So the alderpersons to do a resolution on a moratorium, the mayor to commit by the fall of 2021, and a plan to address TIFs and tax abatements. Would those be conditions that would have to be met before we actually voted on the school closures again? I'm confused a little bit on how we would make sure those things happen. I mean, it seems to be contingent upon those things. Or would these schools be closed and then we also just make a commitment to kind of work on getting the alder people to write a resolution and to kind of work on TIF reform and tax abatements?
Yes.
Yes, what? Could you clarify? I'm sorry.
I think you articulated it well, that we go with the motion, but we also want to proceed to collaborate around A, B, and C, but the schools will close.
Thank you for that clarity.
Are there any other board members who wish to speak on this amendment? So I'm going to read it back again. Jeff, please help me if I get this wrong. I just need another set of ears. So we are voting to amend item 12-15-2001 to remove Hickey and Monroe, delay the final decision on Sumner until 2021, and then add in the stipulations A, B, and C regarding calling on the alderpersons to do a resolution on a moratorium, creating a plan to address TIFs and tax abatements, and the development of a citywide plan.
You left out March.
I'm sorry, March 2021. Yes, thank you. So that is what we're voting on, just the amendment. Ms. Bell.
Oh, question. So remove Hickey, remove Monroe, delay Sumner, plus the.
Plus the 3. That's correct.
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
No.
Ms. Bowell,
No.
Ms. S. Jones,
No.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
motion passed.
So the floor is now open for discussion on the actual item. So what we are discussing here is, do we want to close the following schools? Just a moment. I don't want to mess this up. What's that?
Could you repeat?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I want to make sure I'm clear here, so it's taking just a moment. What we are discussing now is the agenda item as amended, which would read, or which would include the consolidation of the following schools: Clay, Cleveland, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Northwest, and Carnahan, and to delay the decision on Sumner until March 2021, with the expectation that the alderpersons do a resolution on a moratorium on any additional new schools until there is a citywide plan, the development of a plan to address TIFs and tax abatements, and to develop a citywide plan for schools with a new mayor that must be in place by the fall of 2021. So that is what is on the floor for discussion. So I wanted to share, you saw me pause for voting because I think this is probably the most confusing option.
President Collins?
Please.
You don't have a motion yet on this item?
I'm sorry, but we have an amendment, we need a motion.
You have approved amendment, but there has not been a movement.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda item as adopted?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda item as adopted, which includes the consolidation plan to remove Hickey, Monroe, delay the decision on Sumner to March 2021, and to include efforts by the board to have the alderpersons do a resolution on the moratorium on any new schools, coordinate plans to address TIFs and tax abatements, and make movement to develop a citywide plan for schools with the new mayor that must be in place by October 2021.
Is there a second? If you want this to go forward into discussion, it needs a second.
Second.
We're open for discussion on the current item as amended.
This is Natalie. I would certainly support and welcome the alder people to write a resolution, but as we've mentioned many times, it is not binding. We do have a district lobbyist. We do interface with Jefferson City, and I think that it would be not far enough to just rely on the alder people to write a resolution. I think we need to actually make a commitment to going further to the state legislature and actually go hard on that. We really do need that that moratorium, and we really do need a citywide plan. So I feel this is maybe a step in the right direction, but I think we need to commit ourselves further.
Natalie,
Natalie, do you have a motion that you would prefer?
I would be glad to add the amendment to add an item D to include engagement with state legislators requesting legislation be filed for a moratorium on any new charter schools until there is a citywide plan in place, not just for St. Louis, but for Kansas City as well, because most of the legislation is written as urban school districts.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here. You heard me start to say this. I think what we've done is created the most complicated way of going about this, because if this were to pass, the schools would close. We've committed to doing these things, but it doesn't actually impact any decision. So I want to make sure that Clay, Cleveland, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Northwest, and Carnahan will close. The decision on Sumner will be delayed if those options are completed or not. So, which if that is the intent, I think that is great. Throwing our support behind these things is important. You've heard me say, I think they need to happen regardless of what happens here tonight, even if nothing closes. But those three items that have been added in will not have any bearings on the schools that close. And so as long as we all understand that, we can continue this discussion. But I want to make sure that because the way this amendment was done, schools will close regardless of the outcome of those options.
I think the hope is that we hold ourselves accountable by having that as part of it, so that we are required to come back to it and try to do something. And I understand that we can't force any of this, but I know one thing, it does require us to say, this is what we agreed to, and we have to push for this. And I'm assuming that was the intent of this anyway.
So I can't count how many times we come up with resolutions, even, in being a new body, and we've said, we're going to have conversations with the mayor, the board of aldermen, and other city elected officials in the city. And then the conversations haven't happened. I'm not interested in putting down language just to say we did it. Like, for me, it's about everybody putting their money where their mouth is. And at this point, it just feels like we're expecting somebody just to talk, or we're just going to agree to something, and that's that. If we agree to close all these schools, that's it. If you guys look at the website, when we put this stuff up here, there are charter schools that have applied, to be established. It doesn't matter what colorful language right now that says put a moratorium on there. They are coming. These buildings are going to be come for and gone from our communities and out of St. Louis public schools. And I get that we're footing the bill right now, but this whole deal is about privatizing and bringing more charter schools into this city. And so if we're talking about saving our kids, they're going to go to the other schools in the neighborhood and listen to these conversations and offer them the exact same things because they heard this. It doesn't make sense to close all these schools in this plan. If we're talking about, and even Dr. Adams said earlier today, we need a citywide plan, then I don't think that a decision to close all the schools tonight makes sense.
I think we're faced with an unfortunate issue of, today I went through all the schools that are on here, and I looked at how many schools that students who live in that boundary actually go to the schools. Like I said, the highest percentage was 34% of those students. Those students, unfortunately, have made that decision. And it's not just charter schools, it's magnet schools too. We cannot sit and assume that magnet schools have not impacted these schools. They have impacted these schools hugely. And over the 45 years since they started, I've seen it impact our schools. And that's why we're not talking about well, 47 since 2000, I think 3, Dr. Adams said, but there have been far more because so many people made choices to send their kids somewhere else out of their neighborhoods. And I think it's unfortunate, but right now the students aren't attending those schools for the most part.
But Regina, you made a really good point that magnet schools has something to do with it. So how many times are we looking at our neighborhood schools and we see the same beautiful, verbiage and signs that we see in these schools than we see in our neighborhood schools for those? We don't see that. We don't see the highlight of the programs outside of their school for people to even know what's going on. That hasn't happened. And that's a couple of dollars.
So I think the way choice has impacted the city is very complicated. And the magnet school program was the result of a court order agreement that we weren't in control of. So I want to make sure that that's clear, like that yes, choice is complicated, yes, charter is complicated, yes, magnet is complicated, but it is also the result of a court order. So
well, some of the magnet schools started because it was a district plan. When I was in, we didn't deseg with schools out of the county. We had desegregation. We were trying to create integration between South St. Louis and North St. Louis because South St. Louis was all white, North St. Louis was all Black, and they were trying to bring students together just within the city. So that was the initial start of magnet schools.
Well, for someone who's had a lot of children in St. Louis Public School, it wasn't about choice. It was about the reason that the housing stock that was disappearing, that the city deliberately destroyed my neighborhood. That's the reason why many of our parents have to send their children somewhere else out the neighborhood because there's no place to live, because our city destroyed our homes. And if the homes were there, the people would be there and the school would still be there, more than likely. So there's so many blocks in North St. Louis where there are no houses on purpose. So people can come in, buy the land up dirt cheap, and there you go, and you're Black and brown and other ethnicity are gone. So the housing stock had a lot to do with it. It wasn't about choice. Because I loved St. Louis Public School, and my kids went to magnet school and neighborhood schools as well. And there were some fine schools. But the problem was for me is that my neighborhood school was never offering what I wanted, like a Dewey. My children went to Dewey, and in the schools, the neighborhood schools, they didn't have multiple languages. Even Susan, she was able to take Arabic. My other son took Spanish, and the other one took Russian, and the other one took French. My goodness. No, they weren't teaching that over in Herzog. That's the reason why the parents were leaving the neighborhood schools, because we weren't offering them anything, and the housing stock was lousy.
So we're here tonight to make a decision that is the result of many things. What happens next within this district is for this board to decide. So if there are things within this district that need to be structured, or if there are different programs that we want to be offered or want to balance some of those things out across the city, we are also the ones responsible for making those changes. But so much of this is dependent on resources. So I think what we have to do here is essentially prioritize or make a determination on what our priorities are. Are we looking at kind of, do we want to look forward and dream about what is possible? If we could reallocate resources, what does that do for us as a board? What resources are freed up to do some of these things that I'm hearing? Because I think these are all really great ideas. I think there are clearly systemic equity issues within our city that we have a role in rectifying. But if we continue to operate as many schools as we have, I don't know how we actually fix this. And it is unfortunate, to say the very least. It is heartbreaking. I don't want to be here in this situation, and I know none of you do. I know no one in this district does. But how do we take the steps to fix this, given the limited resources that we have? Because those things are going to take a while. They all need to happen. They should have happened 20 years ago. Whenever charters entered the city, there should have been a plan then for who decides when to open, close, and where they go. But it didn't happen. So while we can commit to asking for or demanding all of these things even, what are we going to do with the resources that we have right now to serve the children of the city who we are responsible to? Both pieces of this are true. The reasons we got here is absolutely true. Where we want to go is absolutely true, and we have to find a way to connect those things. And that's the decision that's before us tonight.
So is that the, so we still have a motion on the floor?
We do. So the motion on the floor is to close Clay, Cleveland, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Northwest, and Carnahan. Delay the decision on Sumner until March 2021, with the expectation that this body, and I guess by extension, this entire city, call on the alderpersons and city government to address the following three things as demonstrable support for this district.
Dorothy, or somebody, speak to me on why you think that it's best to grab this delay. I'm not against Sumner staying open, but why is it that we're just considering Sumner and then these three bullet points up under that if we're looking for these things to be applied to our district as a whole? I mean, we have Carnahan on this list. That's almost a brand new school. And we're talking about closing it down. And I get what the history is behind Sumner. Again, I'm not against that. But I mean, there are some other schools such as Ford. Yes, that school was falling apart, but some of these other schools, they don't belong on this list. And so to throw them away altogether, it doesn't make sense. We are not making sense.
So I'll speak to some of those things. I'm happy to have others add on, but just kind of from the logistical piece of this. So yeah, so Carnahan, as this recommendation is, right? Because this is saying to adopt the superintendent's consolidation and closure action plan. So for Carnahan specifically, the plan Dr. Adams presented would transition that into a middle school. So that building over a period of years would transition into a middle school from a high school. So it is my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Adams, that there would not be a time that building is vacant. Okay, so that's the Carnahan piece.
But let me stop you right here. I'm telling you what I'm reading here tonight. And if this is how we're voting on it, it says schools that would close would be Clay, Dunbar, Farragut, Ford, Fanning, Northwest, Cleveland, and Carnahan. So if that is the case, it should be amended and or sectioned off to say that Carnahan would be a middle school, not closed.
So I want to be clear. So as I'm reading the list of schools, I'm truncating the entire item. So to be clear, it says the approval to adopt the superintendent's 2021 consolidation and closure proposed school action recommendations based on Transformation Plan 3.0, which includes the consolidation of schools and then names them, effective with 2020-2021. So in that plan, which is that PowerPoint, that the whole thing that was presented, and I wish we had it, I have a hard copy here, I wish we had it on the screen, but that recommendation, if you remember when they were all listed out, they said closed by the schools, and then Carnahan said.
Yeah, I remember what the language is. I'm just telling you what we see tonight.
Well, but so it's referencing that earlier presentation. I mean, it tells us here specifically which one that is. So I'll let you, I'm not saying that you don't still have reservations, but I'll speak to a couple of the other things and then move on to let someone else speak. So the other piece that you mentioned was why delay Sumner?
And not the other
schools. It is my understanding that is because there are plans that, while I would not call them concrete, there are plans that are nearly complete. There are a number of offers on the table from a number of groups that have, that Dr. Adams has recognized as having the possibility of being put into action in a timeline that fits this district's needs, and the resources are attached. They aren't quite there yet, but because they are something that I'm getting tired, I'm having trouble with words. They're near concrete. They have resources or a recognition that resources are likely attached. And also because there is a number of them to examine and decide between. That has not materialized for any other school. And so because of those things, postponing Sumner for a couple months while Dr. Adams continues to work through those proposals and see if they're viable, to give it another chance to see. There have not been plans like that offered for these other schools.
Also, Dorothy, if you look at the notes from the president of Harris Stowe, he's looking to move fairly quickly, and his interest is in Sumner. So that delay helps him know that he can move forward, and he has funding from a very a large organization.
Right, and again, this language isn't to speak against Sumner. I'm not against Sumner, but what I'm saying is all of us, for the most part, were on these phone calls. For everybody who's looking to possibly support this, are you telling me you heard no real concrete support around any of these other schools except or outside of Sumner?
I'm not saying I haven't heard support.
But what did you hear?
So support and a plan that can be put into place in a timeline that meets this district is really different. We have heard from people at every school or in support of every school that they love their school. Into place or resources that help us put a plan into place. The only one that has both of those pieces is Sumner.
So are we forgetting about the NGA that's coming? That are going to be around
I'm not
the schools?
forgetting, but that's in 5 years. And I don't know that for me, this may be different for you. For me, waiting 5 years, knowing that there are kids in those schools for the next 5 years while they wait, and knowing that they're not getting the quality education that they deserve is too long for me.
Dorothy, but this is the thing. This is the thing for me. We keep saying and acting as though like closing these schools is our only funding source to these kids having a better life. And that is just simply not true. These kids being in these schools means that we look at other alternative ways to make it happen for them that we have not been doing as a board, as a school district. That's what that means. I just think this whole tunnel vision view this whole night has been that if we don't close these schools, we can't make changes, we can't make things happen. I think the way that we're rallying around and getting these other elected officials to the table, and like Donna said earlier today, we can get these corporations to the table to get the money that we need for these districts. These people come into these communities and they do business with everybody that lives around here. They have a corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility that they should be acting on as it relates to helping our community. And that could be one of them. We could be building those partnerships.
You know, that a lot of that, I think that's a great idea, but realistically, Centene just recently announced that they're not building anymore because of the crime. That was very unfortunate. We had I can't remember the bank over down on Market Street. Can't recall their name right now. They made comments about the market. These are things that the city is going to have to deal with, but for us to just assume that they're going to come give us money, which we did call on them in our last meeting to come tell us they'll give us money. They're just not meeting that call because they are concerned about our city. And that's why we're calling on these elected officials to help us get there because they are not doing it. Now, a major company did support Harris Stowe, and we have a lot of students that leave the city schools and come to Harris Stowe. That money, and the president seems interested in supporting the neighborhood, who of course is a city student, school graduate himself. He seems interested in helping, but his interest seems to be at Sumner. So while I think it's idealistic to think that these businesses would come, when we have the issues we have with our city, they're not near as interested in if we didn't have the issues that we have.
And we also have a number of businesses and partnerships. We have a whole agenda full of MOUs where we're partnering with community. The foundation is partnering with companies also to bring resources into the district. And so we have made efforts to include partners at the governing level, as well as partnerships that schools have developed as well.
You know, the biotech school hasn't been in existence very long. And look, they have Build-A-Bear, they have all kinds, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars supporting their school because they're located in the Central West End and because who they cater to. And a large number of those students are coming from St. Louis County. And we continue to support them with our taxpayer dollars. Those same dollars came over to North St. Louis, toward Northwest or any school over there, it would be a totally different story. This is the problem that I'm having with this, is because we can't see where the money has been misallocated toward various schools. And that's why our students continue to suffer. They talk about the crime problem. The crime problem has happened because we have not educated our students the way that they need to be educated. When they graduate, they're not financially literate. They don't have certifications that they need. We have some wonderful alumni that have graduated from St. Louis public schools, but the focus has been on college and career readiness. And many of the people that live in our community and in our neighborhoods cannot afford to continue to send their children to college. If we had been providing a trade school in North St. Louis and South St. Louis, I think our crime problem would be as bad as it is right now. We're with NGA coming, we could have been preparing our children for artificial intelligence. With the construction, I noticed when some of my relatives went, the young men, to try to get jobs, they were hiring men from out of town because they were saying our children or our young men and women were not qualified to work on the construction. And right now we have billion-dollar projects that we don't have students from St. Louis Public School able to participate in the way that they should. So what have we been doing? You know, we need to be doing more. I just think we've lost this vision that we need for our young people. And we have the ground, we're getting rid of property and people are snatching it up and they're gonna fulfill their dreams, filling their pockets up full of money on the back of our tax dollars.
Dr. Adams, is Cleveland closing or being relocated? Because I'm hearing closing. I know Carnahan is transitioning. And Cleveland is what?
It is closing. The ROTC program will go into another school. One other point of clarification, Madam President, you keep saying 2021 is really 21-22. And I think the original document indicated 2021, but it's really 21-22. So this is effective next school year. It's not taking place right now today. This is the 2021 school year. So it would be 21-22, and I think that's an original error that was never corrected in this document. We discussed it, but it was never corrected.
Understood, thank you. I was just reading here, yes.
To your point, Susan, I don't think we're saying that closing is the only option. But to your question about why Carnahan, I believe we were all on the
I
tour.
can't hear you. Adam, can you speak up a little louder for me?
Speaking into a microphone, but sure. So the point about why Carnahan, we were all on the tour at Carnahan when the principal himself told us that that building is not suitable for the high school that they wish to run. And thinking about consolidation of resource, the principal also told us about wanting the opportunity to be absorbed into another school. And thinking about, I believe he said they have 11 APs there. Those are 11 AP courses that are, based on their enrollment, probably not totally filled, but if they did get absorbed into another school or merge with another school, be able to not only provide more seats in AP classes for students, particularly at a school that doesn't have as many AP teachers, AP certified teachers there.
So I'm not speaking against the advocacy once again for Sumner High School. I understand the advocacy. All I'm asking is why is it not the same for these schools, for those that are supporting this motion? I'm asking for the other schools.
And I was speaking to Carnahan. which is one of those schools that you listed.
But Carnahan's going to be transferred supposedly into a middle school. But for any of the other schools, is there any other feedback from anybody?
Well, my concern was that as I listened to, and I went through all the notes and stuff, and from the meetings and things like that. And what led me to my decision, and like I said, I made an about face, but what led me to the decision is that there were a lot of ideas, but nothing was solidified. There were a lot of, we could do this, we could do that, but nobody really, and Dr. Adams would say, do you have funding for this? Are you sure about the funding? And over we heard, well, no, we're going to talk to these people. We're going to talk to those people. And then we heard different groups talk about the NGA. Well, they can do this for us. They could do that for that. But nobody had actually got any confirmation or real understanding that they were actually willing to do these things for us. And we didn't have backers like some of the charter schools have, which include wealthy individuals, companies, major schools like Washington University. We don't have those backers. So while all the ideas were good, too many of them for some of these schools, too many of them were not solidified. My only reason why I consider and don't mind holding off Sumner until March 2021 is that finally, very late, we got some information from Harris Stowe that seems really possible with real funding. So a lot of people with their passion came with ideas, but actually had done nothing to say this is real. And even we saw that housing was being built, but in the where the NGA is building, but oftentimes the people who buy those houses tend not to go to public schools. So they were counting on something that they really didn't know would really pan out like they hoped. So we were, a lot of these ideas were based on hope, not anything really solid. So that's my reasoning for going along with it.
Is there anyone who would like to speak, who would like to add any other comments? Ms. Bell? Yes, I'm sorry, I'll restate. Please stop me if I go down an incorrect path. So we are voting on a motion to approve 12-15-2001, which is the approval to adopt the superintendent 2021-22 consolidation and closure proposed school action recommendations based on the Transformation Plan 3.0, which includes the consolidation of schools, Clay, Cleveland, Dunbar, Fanning, Farragut, Ford, Northwest, and Carnahan, and to postpone the decision of Sumner to March 2021, effective with the 2021-2022 school session. Well, those are how they're in alignment. Yeah. Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts, Ms. D. Jones,
No.
Ms. Bowell,
No.
Ms. S. Jones,
No.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
motion passed.
Feels difficult, I think, to move in to the remainder of the agenda. So if there are any board members who wish to speak now, I will provide space for that.
I recommend we move on, given the time.
So I will add, I know I said this earlier, but I think it's important to restate that this decision was not made based on anything on behalf of students or teachers. We have seen the commitment and the love from the principals and the staff at every school that we visited, regardless of whether it was on this list. We have heard from parents that they love their schools. We have heard from students that they love their schools. And these closures are not a reflection of who you are or the value that you provide to this community or to this district. And that you all do the hard work every day. And that it's time that this city rallied around the school district to provide all of the things that the children of this city need, and that the teachers of this city need, and that this school district needs. And this should not come back again, because I am hopeful that there is a commitment on behalf of every person in this city to make sure A, B, and C happen. So we don't keep doing this every 18 months to 2 years. There's a request by Dr. Roberts for professional development. So I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Roberts.
Thank you, Dorothy. I am putting forth a request for professional development sponsored by the Council of Gray City Schools. It's going to be a virtual event that begins February 19th, 2021 through February 2022. The training is provided so that school board members understand that one of their roles is to be focused on student outcomes. Our governments should be focused on student outcomes, and I invite other board members to sign up if this is of interest to them. I sent all of this to you electronically. And so again, I think it's a very valuable professional development and encourage other board members to participate.
So I move that we approve the recommendation of approve the request by Dr. Roberts and any other board member who wishes to that it extends over February 21 to February 22. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion on this?
If you want to attend, just let you know.
Yes, and we'll make sure that you get registered. There is a deadline, I believe, of January 30th. So if you want to attend, the board does have a policy of them being submitted in writing. So if you could get that to me by the end of the week so we can complete registration.
I have it on my computer. I did email it, so I'll email it to you.
Yeah, email it to me. That would be great. I'm sorry, was there a second?
I did second first.
Thank you. Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones?
Abstain.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Are there any committees that wish to make a report?
I would just remind everybody that at the next meeting, we'll be presenting the final wording on the vision mission statement to include the changes you guys requested at the last meeting.
Are there any other committees that have a report?
This is Natalie with the Governance Committee. We did go over the Code of Ethics, and we will also have a final version to present to the board. And I would like to thank Regina for stepping up and sharing that meeting when I was only available to participate but couldn't be fully engaged. So thank you, Regina, and we will present that to you guys at the next meeting.
You're welcome.
I'll start with Donna. Do you have a board member report? Regina?
Nothing further.
Adam?
No.
Joyce? Susan?
No.
So I have a few comments. This afternoon, Dr. Adams and I attended the State Board of Education meeting, provided an update on the district and the transition back to elected governance. Dr. Adams shared specifics around enrollment, attendance, academic achievement, and other district data while I describe the work this board has put in to build their capacity to govern. One topic we both mentioned was the fact that the city of St. Louis is saturated with schools and that a citywide plan for education must be discussed and adopted before our education system becomes fractured beyond repair. While that citywide plan is being crafted, there must be a moratorium on opening new schools in the city of St. Louis. As such, I will be bringing a resolution on this topic to the board, the January work session for discussion, and I welcome the input of any board member who would like to work with me on writing it. No, there is no requirement that it be enforced without legislative involvement, but it is a place to start. I fully support a citywide plan to create, I fully support a citywide plan, but to create it, the district will need to collaborate with charter schools, charter sponsors, other community organizations. These strategic partnerships will require us to enter into agreements knowing exactly who we are and what we stand for. And we cannot enter into partnership with groups whose missions are murky or change from conversation to conversation, or organizations who implement their own strategic vision in a way that runs counter to the success of SLPS and/or its students. In the spirit of full transparency and the recognition that public education is a public good, I am personally calling on the Opportunity Trust to release the full list of their funders, the grants they've made, and the fellows and organizations they have sponsored since entering St. Louis in 2018. I'm also personally calling on any and all candidates in the current election cycle, including school board candidates, to reject donations from the Opportunity Trust or the City Fund, either directly or indirectly. The City of St. Louis deserves a public education system that is built on trust and transparency that benefits all kids all the time. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd just like to say I'd be willing to work with you on that, Dorothy.
Thank you.
I make a recommendation that we adjourn.
Ms. Bell?
Is there a second?
Yeah, Joy seconded.
Okay.
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones, Dr. Roberts, Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
You're adjourned.